Iron Flame might honestly be one of the worst books I have read all year. I enjoyed the first book. This book, I loathe. I hate this book with every fiber of my being. So if you actually enjoyed this book, I don't think you want to watch the rest of this video because I plan to actually eviscerate this book on every level. I even used up the entirety of one of my Sharpies going through this book. As per kind of my vibe, I'm going to go through the entire book with you, kind of like a summary. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to go over every single thing that I've highlighted here. And there's just a lot. It's so much. I think that this book, it wasn't written terribly. I think that it wasn't edited very well. And that is a critique I'm absolutely going to levy at it. It's very repetitive. The characters say the same things. There's no distinct voice between anyone. Everyone kind of sounds exactly the same. And Violet as a character just doesn't really have a chance to shine because she bleeds through everything and she's just supremely unlikable, which, okay, now I get why Violet's unlikable. So if you just want to see what I actually didn't like about the book, you can skip using the time link below. Or you can sit here and watch me complain about this book for however long this takes me, because this was a lot. All right, we got Millie Bobby Brown as one of the recommendations on this, and I just don't think that... I don't think she's a very, very good source of good storytelling. Just saying. So the book opens with exactly where we left off. Violet is with her brother Brennan, and we're just kind of going through the motions, right? There's nothing super spectacular going on right now. Violet's just explaining how she enjoys the taste of freedom or whatever. She's sort of compartmentalizing the fact that her brother's still alive. She's dealing with that. She's working through it. She's eating food, blah, blah, blah. We have one of my first markers in this book, which is something that has bothered me consistently throughout this entire book that I will be talking about later. It is how consistently these characters, specifically Violet and Xaden, but mostly Violet, they are just Mary Sue's. There's no other way around it. These characters are explained as if they are gods all the time. And it's either Violet's narration, or it's the characters themselves, or it's the teachers. Somebody is always telling these characters how powerful they are, how amazing they are, how great they are. It's to the point where I genuinely dislike these characters, and it feels like they haven't earned anything. One of the first things this also kind of makes me not like Violet, because it's not really playful. It's just leaning into this weird dynamic that these two characters have. Xaden may be gorgeous and powerful and terrifyingly lethal, which shouldn't be the turn on it is, but I can't trust him to tell me the truth about anything. I don't know why we have to keep saying how Xaden is lethal, how he's beautiful, how he's powerful. This I'm not joking. This happens every single time Violet lays eyes upon this guy, and it was kind of one of the things in the first book that I didn't really enjoy. It's almost too much. It's just a little too much, right? Like, we could dial it back just a little bit to kind of make her not seem like she's so weak in the knees for this guy that she just abandons all reason, but she does, of course. Xaden and Violet are kind of fighting. I don't know if you know this from the last book, but they sort of ended on a note where Xaden had lied to her, and she doesn't really trust him. She doesn't know that she can trust him, and blah, blah, blah. And at one point, her dragon kind of tells her something that's a pretty logical point, and she says, "Stop bringing logic into an emotional argument." I want you to understand how stupid that line is. It's not, I don't care that they're 21 or 20. That is a stupid thing to say, to acknowledge that you are being emotional and you should be logical, and then denying it. It's so absurd. Okay, we kind of breach into this room where Xaden's sort of surrounded by the council, who I guess are like the council of the rebellion or whatever, but this is Xaden's home. And they sort of point out that, most of these cadets, the ones that sort of broke free and led the little fight against the wyvern and the venom in the first book at the end, they're cadets, and therefore they have no use to them. Which, this is specifically said, most of them haven't finished their education. They're of no use to us yet. At so many points in this book, we explain that Violet's dragon is the strongest dragon, that her signet is crucial in the war effort, that Xaden and Violet are two of the most powerful riders in the entire world, and they're rejecting these recruits who have been, by all means, like ostracized by the actual academy. They're saying that, oh, that they haven't finished their education. They haven't finished their education. Like, being there for 2 more years, or 1 more year realistically, would actually help anything. It doesn't make any sense. And then Xaden has the audacity to say that his life is worth any of theirs. In the moment, this seems stupid. Near the end of the book, it is royally dumb to know this in advance, to know that he said this in advance, because Xaden's life is absolutely more important than anyone's life. Except, of course, Violet's. Violet continues to sort of talk with her brother, and she's kind of guilting him about hiding the fact that he was dead. There's a little more points in this where I have like slight little gripes with the way of the wording. Like, the move is so him, and as for the question, I ignore it entirely. Like, Violet really is just trying her best to be supremely unlikable, and it's working. And even when she's talking with her brother, it doesn't sound like this is siblings talking, especially not siblings that like genuinely care about each other. And then we have this little line from Violet where she says, "I think back to the naive, sheltered girl who crossed the parapet and everything she survived in the crucible of her first year to forge me into the woman I am now." And I just, the most challenging thing that Violet has endured was, like, it literally happened like a few weeks ago. It was the Venom attack. Up until that point, Violet was still unwilling to kill people. She was still refusing to take up arms against people that blatantly wanted her killed. She has not learned anything at all, but the narrative is telling me that she's different, which it just bothers me. It bothers me. I think there's this implication that Brennan might be he might have been in love with the Nolan guy, who was the guy that like sacrificed his life for him. But I don't plan to read the next book, so I don't really care too much. We just keep going on and on. Violet and Xaden talk for a little bit, and we get this line from Violet's narrative that just, it bothers me. Because love at its root is hope. Hope for tomorrow. Hope for what could be. Hope that the someone you've entrusted your everything to will cradle it and protect it. And hope, that shit is harder to kill than a dragon. As we've seen with Liam, killing a dragon is pretty simple. All you gotta do is, just kill the rider that they're bonded to. But whatever. I think it's super, super cringy. Violet's second dragon, what's her name? Andarna. I'm not going to be able to say that repeatedly. Andarna is kind of implied to be black. And, Taran, her other dragon, says, black dragons are rare, but not unheard of. And Violet has 2 of them at this point, so you think. And she even points this out, and I happen to bond to 2 of them. We're sort of leaning into this this horrible, horrible narrative path where it kind of feels like Violet's a Mary Sue, and by the end of the book, she absolutely is. 100%, no doubt in my mind, Violet has become a Mary Sue. Xaden just keeps saying that he's going to spend the rest of his life trying to earn back her trust. Violet is kind of concerned about having to go back to class because their plan is to just return back to the people that tried to kill them. And it makes no sense. It doesn't make any sense why after their little encounter with the Venom, they have been effectively ostracized from the academy, and they're going to go back. One of the main concerns with them going back to the quadrant is the fact that Dane is there. And if you remember from the first book, Dane's signet is that he can read into memories by touching your face or whatever. What's the solution to this? Xaden says he'll train Violet to shut out Dane's ability. She already has the strongest shields of her year from learning to shut out Tarn. She only has to learn to keep them up at all times. Right here, again, we have another little bit of Mary Sue, and I mark all these points with orange. Anytime there's orange, it's the plot acknowledging how powerful Xaden or Violet is. And this is Xaden saying that because Violet has to block out a horny dragon sometimes, she's strong enough to stop a memory signet wielder from reaching into her mind, which to me is absurd. Violet has more internal monologues. They kind of argue. Violet enforces that the physicality of their relationship is perfect, better than perfect. It's hot as hell and more than addictive. And again, cringy. This is cringy. It's not romantic to me. It's not even sexy. And in the first book, I did think there were some moments where Violet and Xaden really had like great chemistry. And in this book, it's just, he's so hot. I'm so hot. We're so bad for each other. It's so sexy. And I hate it. And it just keeps going like that. And then Xaden says that again, this is one point where Xaden says that communication isn't Violet's strength. And Violet points out that this is kind of ironic coming from him. Again, they're still arguing because that's the most of this book is them arguing. It really is ironic that Xaden is telling Violet that communication is not her strength. I hate to say it, but it's borderline gaslighting. It just doesn't make any sense. And then again, we have another point here where Xaden is kind of gushed over in the plot where it says, Xaden is the wing leader who slaughtered every attacker in my bedroom without breaking a sweat or losing a minute of sleep over it afterwards. It's just cringy. It just continues to be cringy, and I don't really like it. Xaden and Violet's argument has reached this critical point where Violet says, "That's what you promised me in your bedroom. Anything you want to know and everything you don't. Those were your words." And then Xaden says, "Everything about me." And then she says, "That is not what you promised." And Xaden says, "Look, I will answer any question you want to ask about me. Gods, I want you to ask, to know me well enough to trust me even when I can't tell you everything. Because you didn't fall for an ordinary rider. You fell for the leader of a revolution. If he cares about her as much as he says, and everything that happens later in this book is valid, this doesn't make any sense. This conflict is purely constructed so there will be tension between the two of them, because otherwise they would just be gushing at each other all the time and there would be no issues at all. So they arrive back at the academy right around the time when their names are being called on the death toll. And this is another point that bugs me about the writing, and I'll talk about this later. Xaden, they all kind of talk the same, and I don't like the way they talk. Xaden says, "Well, this is awkward," and every head in the courtyard turns in our direction. This way of writing, every head turns in our direction, happens so many times. It's repetitive. It's regurgitated. Like there's no way that there's no way that Rebecca can write everyone looking at them without saying every head turns in our direction, and it turns in their direction at the smallest stuff. So they announce that they're still alive, and then they go through kind of this weird encounter with her mother where everyone's saying, they're lying about what happened to them, blah blah blah. Xaden's kind of talking really he's not talking like he's talking to the general, Violet's mother. He sounds like he's talking to a regular person, which is very odd, but whatever. And then we have another point here where Violet's mother acknowledges how powerful she is by saying, "You survived a knife wound after getting thrown into combat as a first year. Maybe you're more like me than I gave you credit for." There's this repetitive thing that's thrown out. It's just the words, "fuck him." And Violet says this stuff randomly. Fuck him, fuck that, fuck you, just randomly throughout the narrative. And it's just not good. I'm sorry. Then Xaden again, he's talking to a colonel, apparently, and he says, "You gambled and you lost. But personally, I think this is all easily solved by the General Melgen. Surely he foresaw the outcome of the battle with the Griffins." This is a hint to the general, whose ability is that he can sort of see the future of battle. Unless there's 3 marked ones together, in which case he can't see the future, which doesn't make any sense, but we're just moving on. Yeah, Violet actually confirms it right here. Melgren can't confirm anything when there are 3 or more marked ones involved, and apparently Atios knows that. That's stupid. It's dumb. Didn't like it in the first book. Don't like it in this book. We have another point here where everyone's acknowledging how hot Xaden is. "My face heats at the blatant stares from my friends. That was interesting," Rhiannon whispers. "That was hot," Nadine comments. Dude, there's so many. And here we have another fuck him just randomly in there. There's another dialogue point that this happens quite a bit, and I only noticed it in this book, but it was prevalent throughout the previous book too. It's that there's a lot of descriptors for heart and stomach. Nausea grips my stomach leaps in my throat, my heart goes down, the pit of my stomach sinks, just repetitive. This is just how Violet describes everything about like being nervous or whatever. It's not, there's no variation to it. It's all just very consistently my stomach this, my heart that, and it kind of gets annoying once you notice it. Now they're having a celebration, and one of the first lines is "Riders party as hard as we fight, and we fight pretty damn hard," which I think is cringe. We have another point here where the plot acknowledges how crucial Xaden and Violet are. You want the truth? If it wasn't for Rorson and Sorengale, we'd all be dead. That is coming from Emo Jin, who previously disliked Violet, but now she apparently acknowledges how powerful Violet is and blah, blah, blah. And of course, this is technically true, that in the previous fight with the Venom, Violet and Xaden were the only ones that actually were doing something kind of effective, which furthers the point that it's kind of stupid how powerful they are in comparison to how untrained they are, in a sense. Xaden, of course, pushes through Violet's shields without any issue because he's just that good. Then Violet and Xaden again have another argument where they kind of establish that they are technical. Violet establishes that they're technically not together here because Xaden doesn't trust her enough to tell her the whole truth. He's just kind of okay with this because he says that she'll like eventually trust him. And she says, "I tell you we're not together because you won't give me the one thing I need, honesty, and you counter with, it's good for us." He says, and then she calls it arrogance. And he says, "Confidence is not arrogance. I don't lose the fights I pick, and we're both allowed to have boundaries. You're not the only one who gets to set the rules in this relationship." Xaden is toxic. This is not like, I'm not saying this in the sense of like, oh, he's toxic, so it's hot. He's genuinely stupid. This is dumb. She's asking for honesty, and he's saying, "Oh, it's good that we're not honest right now, you know, and this is just not a fight I want to take." And he says this so many times, "I don't lose the fights I pick," which again is so dumb. It's so dumb, and he repeats himself saying the same line, and it's annoying. But think about the fundamental of this relationship right now. Violet is upset that Xaden hid the truth from her. And you would think that that's because he didn't want like the secrets to get out or to get like taken, interrogated out of Violet. But no, he's just deliberately hiding secrets from her because Violet currently has very, very crucial information in her brain that Dane could theoretically pull out of her. And despite this, Xaden's okay with them going back to school. He's okay with her being put back in the place of danger. And Xaden is graduating. So Xaden is already going to be away from Violet. So who's going to protect Violet if someone wants to interrogate her or extract the information? It doesn't make sense to withhold further information from her just due to the fact that she already has information that's dangerous. Just tell her everything. It's not that complicated. There's one thing that you know for a fact at the end of the book that Xaden doesn't want to tell Violet. One thing. That one thing is, it's understandable why he would hide it from her, but still, at this point, come on. And then we get the next page. We get Colonel Atios threatening Violet again, where he says, "I hate to see your mother lose either of her daughters." And then Violet does her usual "what the fuck." I don't like that she does this because she does it a lot. And again, this is a narrative issue. This is a writing issue where we're not giving any sort of variety with how Violet approaches anything. It's just always the same default. Anything happens that she doesn't expect is "what the fuck" or "the fuck." It's just, it's stupid. I'm sorry. It's dumb. And then we get Xaden, of course. "He just threatened your life." Xaden growls, shadows whipping out from behind the pillars. And then, of course, Violet is also struggling to control her power at this point. So we have to acknowledge that she's really powerful again by saying, "Let's get you outside before you bring the whole place down." Jesus. And then Violet again acknowledges right here how strong she is by saying, "Forget protecting me. The quadrant needs protecting from me." Again, Violet is just pointing out how powerful she is. Xaden is pointing out how powerful she is. Blah, blah, blah. We have another encounter with Xaden and Violet do not have good chemistry in this book. So they were just arguing. And now they're arguing again. They're going to argue again because Xaden asks if she trusts him. He says, "Trust me yet." And then Violet's heart jolts because Violet's heart does everything. And then she says, with my life. And then he says, "That's all." And then she says, "That's all. Trust is earned." And he isn't even trying. And then he says, "Too bad." But like I said, anticipation is a good thing. I didn't think that I would be siding with Violet on this one. I really didn't. Violet is right. Xaden is being a total gaslighting, just douchebag at this point. And then we're introduced to this new class, which is RCS, Writer Survival Course. It's kept classified for a reason, so we get your genuine reaction to situations at hand. "No one wants my genuine reactions," says the snarky friend. There's this good question that's poised. What do they do with a bonded writer that doesn't pass the RCS class? Like what would happen then? And they just say, "I have no idea." And one of the things that they are being trained on in the RCS is they're in land navigation, survival techniques, and withstanding interrogation. And Violet's stomach turns over because, of course, torture. And then she says, "And now I carry information worth being tortured over." And you'd think, okay, think about this logically for a second here. Xaden already passed this class. Xaden already went through the torture. So he knew that these students in the second year, all of whom now have valuable information, were going to be tortured for information. And in theory, if there is even the slightest chance that they would use a mind-reading signet to extract that information, don't you think it would make a little bit more sense for them to not go back to school? Well, they do. Conscription Day is it's coming around, so they're getting new first years. And then, of course, Rhiannon has to reiterate that she wouldn't have made it across without Violet, which I don't fully know if that's true to an extent, because all Violet did was give her one of her shoes, but we still have to bring up that Violet is a good person and she saved this chick on the very first day, blah, blah, blah. And this is kind of a point where it feels like the author is responding to the criticism that the first book got, where it was explained that a lot of these trials, they don't really make a lot of sense because you are killing more people randomly for no apparent reason. And it genuinely doesn't make sense. But Violet, of course, has to be the narrative device here that explains why this is useful. She says, "After resin, I'm starting to realize that there's a purpose to pushing us to the point of breaking. Better to shatter in here than get your friends killed once we leave. However, there is nothing shattering about throwing someone off a cliff before they've even set foot on the stage, right? That doesn't make any sense." And then again, her heart's in her throat. Violet is taking the names, and she is distancing herself emotionally from all the cadets. She's basically saying, a little piece of me dies watching the cruelty of it. It's a struggle to remember that every single candidate here is of their own choice. One of the candidates is this big dude that just kind of like throws a guy over, throws someone else off a cliff, and Rihanna calls that Jack Barlow Jr., which is ha ha ha, very funny. It's a whatever. And then we kind of get introduced to this new character, Cam, or should we say Eric, who is he's kind of he's like the emperor's son or something, or the king's son. Violet's heart jumps in her throat as she sees somebody that is Liam's little sister. And if you remember from the first book, Liam asked her to sort of watch after his little sister just in case something happens to her. And, Violet even says, "I promised that I would look out for him." And Violet, throughout this entire thing with all these new recruits, has not helped a single person. She has not given anyone advice whatsoever. But with this chick, Sloane, Violet goes out of her way to offer help. Oh, and her heart abandons her body. It's this. These are two heart things on less than a page. Violet basically helps Sloane's sister, but doesn't help any of the other recruits. And it just doesn't make sense. I'm sorry. It's like I don't understand it. I don't get it. It's, if you're going to be a good person as a character, you should want to help every recruit. And that would make a lot more sense if Violet started breaking the rules, helping a lot of the new recruits learn how to pass the parable or whatever, so that there would be less casualties. But she doesn't. She only helps the one that she's morally obligated to help. And of course, Sloane hates her because she blames her for the death of Liam. Blah, blah, blah. We're back at the parapet. We're doing the same thing we did from the first book, basically. This dialogue sequence annoyed me. Riddock's like the jester. He's like the comic relief. He's the character that just he always makes jokes throughout the entire book, both books. That's kind of his whole thing. Violet sort of notices that he has like something sticking out from his collar, and she says, "What is? Did you get a tattoo?" And he shows the tattoo, and he says, "It wraps to my shoulder to Atrum's relic. Badass, right?" Badass. Nadine nods in appreciation. Absolutely, I agree. This is stupid dialogue. Wow, you have a badass tattoo. Look, we ride dragons. Badass tattoo. Dane kind of gives his speech. Blah blah blah. Sloane gets put inside the squad with Violet. Violet sort of acknowledges that, yeah, I got her brother killed, which I don't think he did, or I don't think Violet got Liam killed, but Violet has this guilt over this throughout the entire book, and it's so stupid. It just doesn't make sense why she would feel that guilty about it. Like, I get it. I get losing your friend would be kind of tough, but they weren't that close, right? Violet, of course, gives advice here that would be crucial for any other recruit to know, that the dragons will torch you if you run. And there's even a point right here that says dragons respect anger. Okay. And then, of course, we have to have Violet acknowledging how powerful her dragon is right here, because she says, "These first years would shit themselves if Tarn so much as did a flyby. He's almost twice as big as any of the dragons perched on the wall." Again, Violet's dragon is the scariest. It's the biggest. It's the most intimidating. Oh, all these people would be so terrified of him if he showed up. I hate it. It's so annoying. Her heart sinks again. And again, something that doesn't make any sense. Why does everybody run? Everybody instantly runs, and I just don't get it. I don't get why you would join the dragon riding quadrant, and then the first sight of a dragon, you run for the hills when the only way back is through the parable, which you almost narrowly died on, and it's just stupid. This dragon kind of almost tries to burn Violet, and it's the dragon that's bonded to the bad guy. Basically, there's a bad guy that's been the vice commander of the school now, and he's changing things as he comes in, and his dragon is basically, it's torching third years, it's torching second or third years, and it doesn't make any sense to do that because some of them are bonded to dragons. It literally makes no sense. This is funny. Riders do not balk at fire, and then Violet says, "The fuck we don't." It's like Gen Z humor or something. Violet's heart stops again. Tarn, her dragon, lands, and he basically like he threatens the other dragon, Solaris, and then they have to acknowledge, like, holy shit, that about sums it up, because Tarn is so fucking scary. He's so intimidating. Oh my god. Her heart is still pounding. Her stomach hollows. This is just stuff that I'm seeing on the page. I didn't even highlight this stuff. Violet has decided that she's going to start running every morning, and this is because she wants to outrun the Venon's death spell, which is they just kill everything around them. And to me, it makes genuinely no sense that we are seriously having the character with like brittle bone disease, whose joints are slipping out of place constantly, running to build her stamina. We got Nadine and Roderick, and she says, stop acting superior. And he says, we are superior. And this sort of arrogance is it's prevalent throughout the entire book, where now, since they're second years, they think all the first years suck, even though when they were first years, they were anything but incompetent. So whatever. Another stomach tenses. Blah, blah, blah. We have a new person coming, and he's teaching. We have Colonel Markham teaching, and he's sort of leading the discussions about the battle brief or whatever, although it's heavily implied that he is basically a voice of propaganda and he's lying about everything, which of course makes sense. Then Violet has this point where she's kind of being an asshole, and she says, "The questions go on and none of them are getting to the heart of the matter, which makes me look at the cadets below us with a healthy dose of skepticism that they aren't the critical thinkers they need to be. Then again, maybe the other years felt the same way about us last year. But then don't worry, Rhiannon says a question. She's like, were they trying to take advantage of the war game situation? And Violet's internal monologue, exactly. It's hard to explain how unlikable Violet is, but if you read the book with like just an ounce of skepticism towards her narration, it's not even unreliable narrating, it's just annoying narrating. She has no control of her powers. She's getting irritated as they talk about stuff, and then they're going onto the mats for the physical, like the same thing that happened in the first book where they go through the physicals and their challenges on the first day or whatever. Violet gets challenged by Sloane, that's Liam's sister, and here we have another point where Violet is pointed out to be stronger than she seems, where she challenges Violet, and Imogen says, "God, Sloane, you really feel like dying on your first day?" And then Rhiannon says, "Did she just compliment you?" And whatever. The next part in this scene really bothers me because the big bull kind of first year that threw the guy off the parable or whatever, he comes over to them and he says, "Did someone say Sorengale?" And then Nadine says, "Popular today, aren't you?" Nadine whispers with a smile, pivoting playfully toward the first year. "Hi, I'm Violet Sorengale." She points to her purple hair. "See, like my hair. Do you have a message for?" And then he snaps her neck. Why would she do that? Why would Nadine introduce herself as Violet Sorengale for no reason? Well, obviously, it's because we want to have her neck get snapped so we can make it seem like Violet's actually in danger. And then the length of a heartbeat again. Violet she pulls out her daggers and says, "No one interferes." Violet says, "I'm Violet Sorengale. My heart pounds." I don't wait for his response, flinging both daggers. Violet fights, and she kind of recalls Xaden's advice to her because she has speed, which is her advantage. But this guy's a giant. And Violet has brittle bone disease or whatever. And they fight. He gets his hand wrapped around her throat, and he's squeezing, trying to kill her. He says, "Secrets die with people who keep them," which is something that Atios said to her earlier. She also says, "And I'm not about to die under some no-name first year." And then we get the same "secrets die with people who keep them" thing. They repeat it. Blah, blah, blah. She manages to kill him even though he's wringing her neck, which Violet is described so often as frail that this is just nonsense to me. Like, how is she still alive? She should be dead. I don't care what kind of training she has. This guy's a giant and he's grabbing her throat. If he wasn't grabbing her throat, sure. But even then, I don't know why he doesn't just punch her or whatever. And then, "You were just strangled, Cadet Sorengale. Not the first time." And then Roderick says, "Damn, Sorengale." And then she says, "It's always something, isn't it?" Yeah, your friend just got her neck snapped, but let's make a quippy joke. Why not? Xaden's been stationed far away, and Violet and him kind of get to see each other like once every week for a couple days. It's sort of like a deal they have because their dragons they're bonded and they have a mate bond, so they can't be separated for too long, otherwise they'll like die or something. And then she sees Xaden and describes him as looking ready to kill someone as usual. And then Xaden says, "I should have told my commander to fuck off and gotten here sooner." And then, he's like looking at her wounds and he's like, and she's like, "The blood is his." And then, then he says, "I'm sorry I couldn't kill him first." And she says, "The first year or Atios?" And he says, "Both." She says, "You can't go around killing cadets. You're an officer now. Watch me." So cringy, man. Okay, so they're together. They're in their room. She's brushing her hair, and she recalls what Xaden said in in the first book that if you ever want to bring me to my knees or win an argument, just let down your hair. I'll get the point, which is stupid, but whatever. And then he just keeps reiterating the fact that just say the three words. Just say the three words. Say you love me, and everything's gonna be fine. But Violet kind of misinterprets this as like hell, I'm gonna tell him that I want him. She doesn't understand that he wants her to tell her that he loves her or what she loves him. Then we have more of this, and we definitely shouldn't sort of thing. Liam's death wasn't your fault, Xaden says. "It was mine." And then she says, "It wasn't your fault." And they go back and forth about that. And then we get this point where he's like, "Sometimes I forget how ruthless he is, how ruthless he can be on my behalf. I've seen death before," I respond. "I was practically surrounded by it last year." The first year is when some of us lose our lives. The second year is when the rest of us lose our humanity. Xaden gives her a letter because that's the only way that he can let her in right now, which is stupid. It doesn't make any sense. She has a conversation with Imogen, who is saying, why don't you just take him back already? And then she says he doesn't trust me and I can't really trust him. And then Imogen's like, oh, I'm not down to talk about your sex life. We're not really friends. It's kind of funny. And then here we have another point of Violet being super casual about people wanting to kill her. People are trying to kill you. And then she says, it's Thursday. Then Violet is kind of given this point right here where she's Jessica, I don't know how to pronounce her name, is the mute girl that she signs, deaf or mute, and she has this old licorice that that only Violet knows how to decode that language. And then we just have more of this stuff where Rihanna is trying to get Violet to be honest with her about stuff, and Violet just keeps going. She can't be honest with her. The truth isn't that easy. Xaden wasn't honest with me. He didn't tell me the entire truth. He still won't. Blah, blah, blah. And then we have this random point here that kind of annoys me where she says, Rhi would be a fantastic wing leader. They're friends. Rihanna has not done anything exceptional at all. Rihanna wants her to come hook up with some infantry cadets as a way to blow off steam, which is stupid, but that's all that this book cares about. Then Varish is the guy whose dragon's a Solaris. He finds Sorengale and he says, Sorengale, there you are. And then Violet goes as if Tarn's hard to miss, because of course her dragon is the biggest and she has to flaunt that. And he says, quite the necklace you have there. And she said, thank you. It was expensive. Cost someone their life. I don't like the way Violet talks. Varish is kind of low-key threatening her the entire time. He even acknowledges, again, it feels kind of like the author's acknowledging the criticism that the book has, where Varish says, tell me, Sorengale, how does it feel about the way he gives you, shall we say, an easier path to take than your fellow cadets? Which is objectively true. And then there's this point in this book that really bothers me, because it genuinely just doesn't make sense why Varish would continually be hung up on this point. But he does. Adriana, or Darna or whatever, Violet's other dragon doesn't show up to formations because she's entering her deep sleep or whatever, and they don't want anyone to know that Feathertails are actually baby dragons. Varish is ordering Violet to appear with both of her dragons, and Violet says dragons don't take orders from humans, and he says, of course not, but you do. I just want to make this very clear. He's still ordering the dragon to show up. That is what he is doing. And his little work around this is that, oh, well, I can't order the dragons, but I can order you, who's bonded to the dragons. That doesn't make sense because he's still, in effect, ordering the dragon to do something, which he shouldn't do. Whatever. And then we have more of this brilliant narrative where we have holy shit and the fuck I will. And basically, they're trying to learn this new method of dismounting their dragons. And Violet is saying that she can't do that. And obviously, she can't do that because she's brittle bone. But she can do everything else. And then Taran, her main dragon, is just kind of we're not going to do it. They will either adapt their request or he'll eat them. Which seems to be Taran's main default is if you say something I don't agree with, I'm going to kill you. Which doesn't make sense, but we're just whatever. Violet is sort of told that she needs to be capable of shielding at all times. And then, okay, in the first book, one of the main things that I hated about Violet was that she poisoned her way through the trials, right? Okay, well, guess what she's going to do in this new book after she's one of the best fighters with the biggest dragon or whatever? It's time to start checking the list the cadre keeps so I can go about my poisoning ways again. Whatever. And then Bodhi, who's Xaden's cousin or whatever, he says, I've never seen him care like this, and that includes with Catriona. He just casually drops Xaden's ex there because we have to have more conflict. And then Bodhi says that he's also, people have been trying to assassinate him as well. So, okay, so everybody that's come back, basically, people are trying to kill them. Which, okay, why would we come back? It doesn't make any sense. This is just a little bit of repetition here. Bodhi says, you made a fair point, and then Violet says, I made the only point. And then at the same point later on, Bodhi says, fair point again. Her heart stutters, And again, since Violet's dragon didn't join her, she's now going to be punished for it. Whatever. Taran says, "Call me if you need me," and Violet says, "Like hell, I'm going to call him for anything." She goes to visit Xaden, and he is shirtless. Xaden is shirtless, and here we have another point where Xaden is being just talked up to be the most badass guy ever. She says, "This isn't sparring. This is straight up fighting." And the way Xaden hit him, he's holding back. And she talks to someone there who's kind of like, "Oh, this other guy is going to take Xaden." And Violet says, "He won't take him at all. Xaden's playing with him." And then the same chick kind of explains that she's met Mira before, Violet's sister, and she says she has a hell of a right hook. And then it appears Rorson does too. He does. "You sound pretty confident." "I am. My confidence in Xaden is almost arrogance. Gods, he's beautiful. I stare. I can't help it. His body is a work of art, honed to lethal perfection. This should absolutely not be turning me on, but the way he moves, the lethal grace in each and every calculated strike. Yep, turned on. Maybe it's toxic as hell, but it's pointless to deny that every single part of me is attracted to every facet of Xaden. And it's not just his body, it's everything. The parts that I know are merciless, willing to annihilate anyone and everyone who stands between him and the goal, to pull me in like a moth to a fucking flame." This is cringy. I'm so damn in love with him that it hurts, and for the moment I can't remember why I'm denying myself. We have another point of repetition here, just to point this out. Honed to lethal perfection, and then the lethal grace. This is all within the same paragraph right here. It's just lazy. Always so violent, he points out. Then he just knocks the guy out, and somebody says, "Damn." And then Violet says, "Exactly. Is it wrong to smirk? Because I can't seem to control my facial muscles. Gods, I'm screwed when it comes to this man. It doesn't matter that he hurt me, didn't trust me. I don't even know if I trust him, but I want him. Gods, I miss the feel of his skin against my..." Oh, wait. Is this the point? Yeah, it is. This might be actually the point. Okay. Just for the sake of my point, I've pointed this out. I might bring this up again later. One of the main things about this book that I hate is the phrase "gods" followed by something. And in this sequence, it happens repeatedly. Okay, listen. Bear in mind, this is 2 pages, right? Okay? Gods, I'm screwed when it comes to this man. Gods, I miss the feel of all his skin against all of mine. Gods, he tastes like home. Gods, yes, deeper. Gods, I've missed the taste of you. Gods, I can't even remember. Okay, it's 3 pages. I lied. There's 6 uses of it in 3 pages of gods. Xaden says this thing where how badly he wants to peel those pants off your amazing ass and fuck you until you're hoarse from screaming my name, so limp from orgasms that you can't fathom leaving my bed ever again, and every tree around here goes up in flames from lightning strikes. Xaden's whole thing is that he doesn't want her to offer her body to him when she doesn't love him emotionally. We have another version of this. Again, this is used so often. Gods. My body feels like it's cooking itself alive. Violet is being punished for the dragon not showing up. She's being forced to do lightning strikes over and over again. She tells Varish, "Humans do not command dragons, and that includes you." And then we have another point here where the narrative is telling us her signet is the weapon generals dream of in this war. So Violet is very, 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 very crucial. And then once more on the other page, we also have the same thing. "You are a rare, powerful signet, Cadet Sorengale." So we're just telling Violet how strong she is. More gods. This kind of bothers me, these little points. So Violet occasionally will pull out her daggers and start spinning them. And the way that Rebecca describes this is very repetitive. Okay, so "I unsheath a dagger and flip it, catching it by the tip, like my skills can in any way help her when she won't even speak to me." Imogen says, "I, unlike some people, don't feel the need to know everything someone else deems private," which is stupid to say, but whatever. And then Violet says, "Yeah, well, you're not sleeping with me." And Imogen says, "You wish you were my type. I'm phenomenal in bed." Further cementing the fact that everybody just likes talking about sex all the time. Violet continues with her dagger description. where she says, I catch my knife flipping it with total muscle memory. And that is something that line, total muscle memory, is repeated multiple times. And it's stupid. I'm sorry, it's dumb. Oh, as a matter of fact, it's repeated on the exact same page. I catch my knife flipping it with total muscle memory, and then muscle memory takes over as I spin. Someone came behind her, and Violet, muscle memory takes over as I spin around, dislodging the grip, and push my left forearm against the leather-clad chest, catching the assailant off balance and allowing me to shove him the few inches backward into the wall while whipping my dagger around to his tattooed throat in one instinctual motion. It was Roderick. It was Ridrick or whatever. And then he says, I knew you were fast, but damn. Again, this is, one, it's repetitive in the form of the muscle memory descriptor. Two, we are telling us that we're being told again how violent and we're being told again how like impressive Violet is with the daggers, which is overkill at this point. They get sort of pulled off into their secret little navigation thing. Bags are put over their head. They're all given water, and Violet describes it as the water's crisp cold, but there's something else in there too, pungent and earthy, and something bitterly floral that I can't place. Professor Grady really needs to take better care of his skins. So it turns out they just all drank a special serum that sort of cuts off their connection to dragons, which has never been a thing before, but now it's a thing because they want to cut off people from their dragons. And then they're sort of paired with the infantry where they're supposed to go through their land navigation course. The infantry professor kind of walks up, and Violet says this. Violet says, I draw back slightly, surprised at my first instinct, which is to tell the infantry captain to fuck off because I don't answer to her. No rider does. The 8 of us stand, but we're not even at ease. We just are. Riders are explained as being complete assholes. For one, Violet doesn't even respect an infantry commander, professor person. And her first instinct is telling them to fuck off. These are just so, they're so bad. They're so stupid. Gods, I feel vulnerable again because we have to say gods. And of course, right here we have, you're the most powerful rider in yours. That was directed at Violet. So they're just telling her how powerful she is again. Them and the infantry are supposed to work together to go through this navigation thing. Already, they are threatening each other. Rihanna says, give it to her or I will cut out your hands, or I'll cut it out of your hands. We have another, gods, the grass is high. And then we have another, your rank means exactly jack shit to me. The infantry guy says, what, like you're so above us infantry? And then Ridrick says, I mean, technically when we're flying, we're above everyone, but if you're asking if I'm better than you, then the answer is obviously yes. You want my respect? Earn it. Cross the parafel, climb the gauntlet, survive the threshing, and then we'll be on equal footing. So this is a point where the infantry is clashing with the riders, and Ridrick is explaining why the riders are so much better than the infantry. And in his explanation, he points, or Sawyer, another one, chimes in and points at Violet and says, see her? She bonded not only one of the biggest fucking dragons on the continent, but a second dragon, and then went into combat against griffins a couple months ago and came out alive. You go through that type of shit in your quadrant? They're just explaining how powerful and how impressive Violet is all the time, every time. It's so annoying. And this part's kind of funny, where a guy randomly, or a girl, randomly says, oh, you're the general's daughter, again at Violet. The hair kind of gives you away. So the assassin that was sent to kill Violet didn't even know her hair color, but apparently the hair is so prominent that this random infantry cadet knows what Violet's hair would look like. While they're out there navigating, they encounter Bade, who is Jack Barlow's dragon, and the dragon isn't dead. Shocker, shocker. Wonder why. Then the riders come out, and they decide to go in front because they think the dragon won't kill them, which doesn't really make sense. And then gods, they all smell scared. And then Roderick kind of casually points out she, Violet, dropped a mountain on her rider. And then Violet's heart leaps into her throat. And then we have another holy shit. Someone dies from the dragon, and Rhiannon pivots to the face the terrified infantry. And that is why you don't fucking run. But they have no issues letting their cadets run away from the dragons on the first day without ever, telling them, hey, don't run from the dragons. These are little markers that are kind of put at the top of the chapter, and sometimes they're passages from Brennan's book, or sometimes they're from the Codex. Brennan wrote this. There's a course, there's a second-year course that I can't tell you about other than to say that it's hell. My only advice, don't piss off anyone else's dragon. That is a reference to this course, the RD whatever course, the survival course. Nobody told her about, he had intimate knowledge about the interrogation stuff, and he didn't give it out. Why? Who knows? Why didn't Xaden give it out? Who knows? I mean, they're trying to overthrow the continent, but I guess they're going to keep secrets. And then this guy is just sort of gushing over Violet. He looks at me with reverence I don't deserve. I owe you my life. We definitely have a... Oh, this is another repetitive thing. Okay? Right here, Violet is saying, we definitely have a few things to learn from each other in reference to the infantry because they have like meal kits or something. And then on the next page, literally the next page, the professor says, it's apparent that we have a lot to learn from each other. They're right there. This is repetitive. This is in the same page. This should not be here. We have another holy shit here, and this is because Taran shows up, and Taran is so scary. We have another gods, I'm so tired. Violet kind of goes back to the archives, and she's previously she asked for the book that her father gave her, which was about the venom and the wyvern and all that. She asked Jessica for the book, and Jessica she couldn't find it, and she thought, whatever. But we kind of learned that Jessica accidentally got someone killed because they asked for a specific book, and she sort of reported it up the chain of command, and then they took that person and killed them. So it's kind of implied that, okay, she could have gotten Violet killed if she had reported this book, but she never did. And then Jessica signs, if you were any other writer, I would have considered you have a faulty memory, got the title wrong, or even the subject matter, but you're you. So again, we're telling that, Violet she's so amazing, she's the best, blah, 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 she's just the best person ever. Then we're back in the fighting quadrant, or fighting again. Everyone's kind of just like insulting the first years. Violet once more poisoned a bunch of people because she was trying to help Sloane. And Violet says, oh, well, it wasn't like I knew which one Danish was going to eat. She also kind of comments how she hates Dane, but she actually wanted to be in a relationship with him last year. Blah, blah, blah. We have another gods. I wish that were true. We have another, you sound like Xaden. And here's kind of, this point bothers me because one of my main criticisms of Violet in the first book was the fact that she used poisoning to sort of get her way through the challenges. And then when she's confronted with the idea that she actually needs to sort of learn how to fight, you would think that naturally she would try and fight or maybe incorporate poisoning into her fighting. But instead, she goes right back to poisoning. You would think that this would kind of make her look like less in the eyes of her peers because she didn't fight physically and win. She cheated. And Imogen says, damn, is that how you got through those first challenges last year? Devious, Soaring Gale. Fucking brilliant, but devious. So we're complimenting her for cheating. Cool. And then Sloane is like, I didn't need the help. And then Imogen goes, wrong tactic. A thank you is appropriate. Like, what the fuck what do you mean a thank you? She cheated. She cheated and didn't even ask the chick if she wanted help. And then Violet has 50 letters from Liam that were written specifically for Sloane. And she is leveraging that over Sloane in order to get Sloane to agree to get trained because they think she's going to lose in the combat or she's going to die at some point and she's not going to have. Violet is holding letters from her dead brother over her head to get her to do what she wanted to do. And you would think this would make her morally bad, but no. Imogen says, I see it now. What? Why Xaden fell for you. You're fucking clever. Way more clever than I gave you credit for. I bet you keep him constantly annoyed. How glorious. And then again, we have another Tarn threatening to eat someone. We have another point right here where we're talking about Violet and how powerful she is. Imogen, again, says, "Oh no, that part is completely understandable. Separating you two would be my first move if I was in a position of power. On your own, you're both capable of terrifying things with those signets. Together, you're a fucking menace. I mean, it's weird that he's writing you letters." And then we kind of get to okay, so yeah, Violet and Xaden are so powerful together. They're so terrifying that we have to separate them. Imogen says, "You didn't want normal. If you did, you'd be in a relationship with Atios Dane, but you wanted Rorson. And you're mad at the wrong person because you lied to yourself," which, again, they're gaslighting her. She is not in the wrong about this. Xaden is hiding things from her, and it doesn't make any sense. Violet once more loses control of her power after she gets kind of irritated, which seems to be a very common thing. And she says again, "Gods, that's getting so fucking easy. We just have so many more of these gods." Rihanna is trying her best to be like, "Hey, you can tell me anything. We're best friends. We both broke the law. You can totally tell me." And she's like, "No, I don't want to." She meets with Xaden again. She describes him as, "Even his movements are slower. Not by much, but I notice." Whatever. She says, "I didn't say you aren't beautiful." And then he says, "You think I'm beautiful?" And then, again, we have more Violet's reading through books, trying to discover about the original six or whatever, who created the wards. And Xaden, again, is like, "Say those three little words and I'll have you naked in seconds." And she says, "I want you all day, every day." And he's like, those aren't the words that he wants. And he specifically wants the "I love you." And then she says, "Those are the words you're going to get." That was quick. Xaden says he can make it innuendo, but doesn't. I just don't like these two. They're not good together here. We have kind of this point where Xaden keeps repeating like he's telling selective truths. He's not lying. He's just not telling the full truth, which is stupid. Violet, returns these words to him and says, "I haven't hidden shit from you. I've simply told you selective truths." And then she's like, "How is it possible to love someone and love someone and loathe them in the same moment? This conflict between these two is stupid." And then he says, "I'm pissed that you hid it from me, but I'm livid that you put your life at risk for me. That's not something I can handle." Stupid. It doesn't make any sense. They encounter Nolan, who's the person that was mending her. Xaden seems kind of weirded out by Nolan. Then Nolan is meeting with Carolyn Ashton, who from the first book was Jack Barlow's girlfriend, and Nolan is always tired now and he's exhausted. Nobody really knows what he's doing, but he's been gone for a long time, and I wonder what that could be. We don't know. Xaden goes with Violet to meet with Jessica, and then while Xaden's just standing there, Violet says, "Stop scaring her." And he says, "I'm just standing here." And she says, "That's enough. Trust me." So Xaden is so intimidating that his presence alone is making people quake. I hate the way Violet describes Xaden. I hate the way Xaden is just described in general. It's so annoying to have a character described like this. And Violet is surprised that Xaden can sign. Xaden can sign. Liam could sign. A lot of people can sign. Pretty much everyone she brings by can sign, and she's surprised that Xaden can sign when Xaden's like good at everything, but whatever. Xaden and Violet argue again. She says, "You expect complete blind faith without giving it. It goes both ways." And he says, I'm the one who doesn't trust you. I'll see you later. I have to go." And with like shadows curling around him. And it's like, dude, Xaden is annoying. And then once more we get this line, "Dragons do not answer to the whims of men." And this is repeated repeatedly. It's constantly given to us. And despite this, Varish continues to do this. So Violet's being punished. She's calling down the lightning. Violet says, "I attack anyone foolish enough to sneak up behind me this year." Taran comes, and Taran's really angry. He says, "It is not within your power to summon a dragon." And then the dragons relay the thoughts. And then Varish says, your dragon does not fall under my command, Sorengale, but you do." Which, again, we are repeating this. It seems so stupid that someone this high up in the chain of command would have this thought process. It doesn't make any sense. "Even the smallest dragon does not answer to the most powerful of humans, which you are not." Taran, her dragon, he's basically arguing with him. Violet just goes, "Oh shit." And then Varish just goes, "But you," and points to Violet, "Answer to me." And again, we're going in circles. And Taran kind of bites the dragon, Solaris' dragon, and is threatening to kill him. And he demands that Varish back off and apologize to Violet at the same time, which you will see as a reoccurring theme where some powerful figure wants someone to apologize to Violet, and then she's like, "Oh, you don't have to do that. It's fine." And then they force them to apologize anyway, which again, uh, his apology isn't necessary to me. Really, I'm happy to just not die today. And then Taran repeats it, demands the apology. He gets the apology. Blah blah blah. So it's a new day. I don't know if you can tell that. Um, it took me a while to. I kind of I didn't want to give up on the review, right? Because there comes a point when you're like complaining about something that you start to wonder if you might be the problem. I don't think I am. All right, so where we left off last time was Taurus basically forced Varys to apologize to Violet, which Violet, of course, was like, "Hey, I don't need you to force him to apologize to me, even though he's like literally the walking devil." But whatever. So continuing on, Rihanna and Violet walking towards the flight field, and Rihanna and Violet have a conversation that, again, I feel is the author sort of addressing the criticisms of their book, in the sense that Rihanna basically says that the gauntlet is pointless, that it's pointless, and specifically just a way to weed out the weaker or worse, the unlucky, which is objectively true. These are facts. But Rihanna's argument is presented as wrong because Violet says it's not pointless, it has a place, and she specifically says, "It made me look at everything differently. I couldn't climb it the same way you did, the others did, so I had to find another way. It taught me that I could find another way and still survive." Which is not the argument being made. The argument is that it is stupid and it's pointless and it results in unnecessary death, which again is objectively true. Just because Violet managed to find a very specific little piece of the codex that allowed her to use a knife that she crossed the parable with does not mean that everybody else would be capable of doing that, and that doesn't set her apart at all. It makes her quite literally saved by the plot. Violet goes on to say when Ariel fell, that's the girl that when she was crossing the gauntlet, Violet watched her die. Violet says that that made her a better rider, and that due to that, she deserves to be there, which makes no sense. Again, and then this section goes on where it seems like Violet is trying to justify the gauntlet. She says, "That stupid fucking gauntlet isn't just about physically climbing it. It's about overcoming the fear that we can't. It's about climbing after we see it kill our friends. The parapet, the gauntlet, the presentation. They seem excessive when we're here, but they prepare us for something worse when we leave." And then Violet says Rihanna can't understand this until she sees what is out there. But to clarify, Violet is referencing a secret war with the Venin, which the government doesn't want their students to know. So these things, training them to fight that, doesn't make sense at all. And the fact that their training regimen is not geared towards specifically combating the Venin, Violet's whole argument is nonsense, and it comes off straight up as the author just trying to justify a plot hole, which it would have been much easier to just say, yes, it's pointless, but it makes us a little better. But Violet doesn't say it's pointless. She doubles down, blah, blah, blah. She brings up Liam's death again. And then she clarifies that, they're weapons, and this is the place where they temper us or sharpen us, which is stupid. And then again, we have the word indignation being used again, which, if you remember from my first review, was a word that I noticed appearing frequently in the first book that bothered me. Moving on, we're kind of going to Samara now. It's so that Violet can do her weekend greeting with Xaden again, because, again, they have to do that. It's required due to the bonds of their dragon. Again, the way Violet describes Xaden really bothers me, because she just says, "He's the horizon, and nothing exists beyond for me." There's this relationship between these two is just complete nonsense. And I mean that in a way that it's romanticized nonsense, not in a good way, because it just seems she's utterly infatuated with him. He's utterly infatuated with her. All of their conflicts are just pulled out of thin air just for the sake of the story happening. She makes him kiss her, or he makes her kiss him, and they kiss, blah, blah, blah. And then Mira turns out to be there. And that is the main reason he wanted her to kiss him, was so that he could ensure that she stays with him in his room or something like that. I don't like this. This is probably just a personal gripe. It happens a few times. Xaden and Violet like full on face sucking make out in front of her sister and her brother, and it's just weird to me because maybe this is just my own personal thing, but I would always be a little hesitant to do that around family or even friends to do full on making out like sensual kind, which is what they do all the time. But Violet just kind of grins when her sister comes around, and I guess maybe this culture is a little bit more open into being sex positive or whatever. But it's still weird to me. It still puts me off. Well, this sequence here ends kind of with something that bothers me, and I even circled it because it annoyed me. Violet says, "Ugh, let's go throw knives at shit." And this is one of those little dialogue things that just it pulls me out of the immersion entirely. This sounds like something like a modern teenager would say, and it's just kind of stupid. And then what follows is this whole thing again where Violet is they're having a conversation, Mira and Violet, and while they're having a conversation, they're throwing knives. And what we've decided to do is describe pretty much every single time a knife is being thrown, and it's always the same sort of description where Violet says, "I flip my dagger, catch it by the tip, and throw it, hitting the target in the neck." And then Mira throws a knife without looking and hits the same target. And then it's just a weird back and forth. Like, I get the scene is them throwing knives at stuff, so we have to describe them throwing knives. But when your character, your main character's like primary method of attacking is throwing a knife, and every single time she fights someone, the same descriptor of flipping it to the tip, catching it, and throwing it is used, it's super repetitive. There's no variation. It's kind of boring. Violet says this thing where Mira is sort of explaining to her like the RCS is like super dangerous because they'll use pain to sort of like extract information from you. And Violet has this moment where she says, "I can handle pain. I live in pain. I practically built a house there and set up a whole economy. I can take whatever they dish out," which you eventually learn is not entirely true. But also, why is Violet able to like cope with pain to the extent that she should be able to resist torture? I don't get it. I know that she has this disability where her joints slip out of place all the time and she breaks bones easily, but that doesn't mean that you're just so used to the pain that, oh, if someone starts torturing me, I'll be fine. It's totally not going to be fine. And then Mira sort of says, if they might accidentally torture you to death if you don't break. And it's like, okay, well then what's the point of the RCS if we're going to torture them to the point of killing them? It actually makes no sense. Then we just talk about Xaden's daggers, how he made them for her. We're still throwing, flicking daggers, throwing knives, flipping. And here's the thing again. I said earlier, I said a few days ago that the descriptor is used muscle memory repeatedly. And here's another one. "I continue flipping my dagger in my hand by pure muscle memory." I just don't get it. And then even Violet says, "I keep moving the dagger and hope she sees it as casual." It kind of seems like Violet is trying to like make her older sister believe that she's capable and able to do this, but she's doing that by flipping a dagger around. And I just don't get it, considering what Violet's already been through is more than enough to warrant some level of respect for like her ability to navigate dangerous situations. But instead, she's just gonna flip a knife and be like, "Mira, please notice me." And then finally, we have something that apparently Violet hasn't mastered, which is a lesser magic, which is a sound shield, which maybe I just missed where it was brought up. It said that she used this previously, that Mira used it in the past, and I don't remember that, but whatever. Violet hasn't mastered it because it's simple magic or whatever. We keep going, and Violet's sort of trying to tell Mira about the truth. She wants to tell the truth to Mira. She wants to like drop hints, and she says like, what if the attacks are from the Wyvern? And Mira's just kind of like, "What are you, like tired or something?" And Violet kind of gives up, and then Mira just says like, "Oh, okay, I got some good teas I can recommend to you so you can get some sleep." I don't really like that. It just seems kind of like a very poor attempt on Violet's behalf to try and explain what is happening to Mira when there's a sound shield up and she should be able to just tell her the truth. And Violet even acknowledges this by saying, "This is it. This is the opening to tell her the truth." And Violet doesn't necessarily tell her the truth. She just presents a hypothetical. And when Mira shoots it down because her whole life has been telling her that that is not real, Violet's like, "Okay, I give up." And this is brought up later. And I just don't like the way that this conversation is handled out. It could have been done a little bit better to make Mira's skepticism more understandable. We're back in bed with Xaden. Violet learns that on the borders, they've been killing civilians. Infantry specifically has been killing civilians that are like trying to cross. And Violet's like shooken by this. But again, this shouldn't be surprising information considering we live in like a totalitarian government where we are actively kind of suppressing the truth, and we're killing anyone that has the potential to reveal the truth. Here's another thing where he says, Xaden says, you're allowed to have secrets. That's the point. I'd prefer they not risk everything I've worked toward for the last few years or your life. Again, I can't stress this enough. The whole conflict between Xaden and Violet doesn't make sense because Violet is unequivocally correct that Xaden should be more forthcoming with information, and she shouldn't have to present him a question in order to be let in on the secret. It doesn't make any sense. There is one thing, like I said earlier, that Xaden has a right to want to hide. The rest of it doesn't matter, and it's kind of stupid that he's doing this. He gives her this sort of book about knots or something, which kind of seems like a hint at bondage, but really it's just him wanting her to learn culture, apparently. Violet kind of acknowledges that she can't even shield out Xaden right now, so it's not like she's very good at shielding. But Xaden counters and basically says that due to their connection, there's no way she can fully keep him out ever. So he's not a good measure of her skill, and that she's actually super, super skilled. It's just she can't be skilled with him because, whatever. And then Xaden says, you love me, and she responds, stop reminding me. And he says, maybe you're not the one I'm reminding, before they fall asleep, which I've always been told never go to sleep angry, never go to sleep on an argument. And this definitely, it's so weirdly manipulative that he's like, I'm reminding myself that you still love me because you're being so offstandish right now. Violet's struggling with her rolling dismounts. We have more of these descriptors of her heart stopping and blah, blah, blah. And then we're kind of in class right now where Professor Devora is sort of explaining what they're going to hear about the battle brief. She approaches the topic of culture, all right? And this is another point where Violet is kind of singled out as being the only voice of reason, which really, it bothers me so much. Whenever Violet says something or someone says something very like, oh my God, the descriptor of all heads turn in my direction is used. And this kind of feels like another one of those moments where Devora is sort of asking, what's the difference between the provinces in the border and ours? And nobody answers, but then the professor looks directly at Violet and is like, you're the main character. So Violet answers with some cultural blah, 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 and she recites it verbatim from Markham's book, and Markham is the propaganda guy. And then someone responds, except Tyrandor, who apparently just got, like, annihilated. And then Devora steps in and, like, argues with this guy and says, it's comments like that threaten the unity of our continent. And then says, Sorengale brought up a good point that I think some of you are missing. And this is, again, it's too much of the main character being always right all the time. And it just bothers me. They're having this little brief discussion about what has been lost in culture, what parts of our culture is lost in translation. And this is actually pretty accurate for when, indigenous people, when they meld with other groups, a lot of what they lose is their culture and their history, and that's why it's so important to sort of preserve that stuff to keep the authenticity of it. But this is just Violet being right all the time, and it comes off bad. It's done really poorly, because instead of Violet stepping back and letting other people that actually experience this talk, she sort of takes the center stage. The guy that's been arguing sort of says it's a dead language known to all but a few scribes, and the guy says that, just because it's not Tarish doesn't mean you can't walk into the archives and read whatever translated Tyrish book that you want. And Violet says it's his arrogance that makes her, respond. And she says, no, actually, you can't. For starters, no one can enter the archives and read whatever they want. You have to put in a request that any scribe can deny. Secondly, and then she just goes on and, blah, 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 and then just says, things are lost in translation. And then the professor, Cadet Trebor, if I were you, I would consider the fact that Cadet Sorengale has spent more times in the archive than anyone else in this room, and then I would carefully consider an intelligent response. Which, okay, To give Violet the credit, her character is built up as being sort of the nerdy one, the one that's an archivist, the one that cares about like details and sorts through history. Sure. But to have a professor like so blatantly favor Violet to the point where any discussion is just wiped aside and they say, well, Violet's right. I don't like that. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And then again, we have another point right here where Riderick, he's making a joke, but he says, Violet knows everything. And then everybody laughs and she rolls her eyes. And I just don't like it. We're back in the gym now. And then Violet sort of like threatens Dane again. She's like, I'll stab you. That's when we'll be friends again. And she flips him off. And then she says Dane's being the asshole. And she goes on this tangent about how he was supposed to be like her everything. He was supposed to be her boyfriend. They were supposed to get together. And then, we kind of have this thing where she's skirting around the issue of explaining what Dane did, which is specifically Dane reached into her memories and pulled out a memory. That's kind of what caused the whole ending of the book. We have another stomachs dropping to the floor. Dane basically challenges Violet on the mat. And this is a sort of a repeat of the first book where Xaden challenged Violet, although Xaden's thing was just to specifically teach her that, hey, you can't like cheat your way through everything. And now Violet's whatever. Violet has like a messed up arm, so it's technically not really fair that they fight. This is presented as like, why does that matter? Why does it matter that she's injured? And if you think about this critically for even 2 seconds, it does matter if two cadets are fighting and one of them has a broken arm. That's not training. That doesn't make any sense at all. It's pointless, okay? Violet sort of categorizes this as, he's not Xaden, but he's deadly enough without any weapons, and I'm down in arm. And then someone points out that Xaden's gonna fucking kill him, because of course Xaden has to be the final like shadow that looms over Violet. Anytime anything bad happens to her, Xaden is right there to threaten to kill whoever's saying whatever it is to her. And I guess this is like something that people like. For me, it seems to rob Violet of all of her autonomy, and she's just, at the end of the day, protected by Xaden. And then she sort of says, just remember who trained me. This is a hint that, Xaden trained her, therefore she should be able to win with only one arm, which is just nonsense. And then Dane says that she can keep her daggers, to which another cadet says, she's good enough to kill you from here with those, which is like saying, oh, she can throw daggers at you. Whatever, dude. And then Violet says, if it comes between killing Dane and saving Xaden, there's no choice, which to me, this again is just, it's Violet not making sense. Violet is saying she's totally down to kill her friend of 15 years if it means protecting Xaden, the guy that she's known for approximately a year, if that. I just don't get it. Dane says that, Violet, you're faster than last year. And she responds that Xaden taught me a few tricks, which I don't know. They sort of tussle for a very brief moment. It's not even much of a fight. And then the way this is described just kind of annoys me, because she's slammed into the ground. She's in pain. Then says, but damn if my blade isn't at Dane's throat when he pins me with a forearm at my collarbone a heartbeat later. Violet, again, is just threatening to kill Dane. Dane clarifies that he saw a memory, and the only thing that he saw was a flash of a memory, and it was Rorson, Xaden, saying that he's gone to Aberystwyth or whatever with his cousin, which he's not allowed to do due to he wasn't permitted leave for that. So that's why Dane told his father, because he thought it was breaking the rules. He didn't tell him explicitly to ensure that Violet was killed, which is kind of what was heavily implied in the first book. So I feel like this is kind of a cop-out. We have a moment where I feel like the author is trying to explain away a plot hole, and I don't like it, because Violet points out that Dane said, I'll miss you. And anyone, even reading that in passing, could tell there was it was a malevolent sort of implication. It wasn't like a cutesy, oh, I'll miss you forever. It was like, I'll miss you, you're gonna die. But Dane explains it, and he says, I said I'll miss you because you chose him. I told you I knew things about him, that he had reasons you don't know about to hate you, and you still chose him. I knew I was saying goodbye to any chance of us on that field. I had no clue Griffins were waiting to ambush you. And then Violet counters with, I know every reason Xaden has to hate me, and none of them matter. Dane sort of reveals that your mother, Violet's mother, is the one that gave Xaden all of his scars. And then Violet sort of says, It was the fact that Dane took his memory and told his father that got her friends killed. Therefore, she's never going to forgive him. Which, to me, it just seems. Yes, you can argue that that definitely got them killed, but at the same time, Dane thought he was just telling on someone for leaving without permission. That's it. And what resulted from that was his father having more information, knowing explicitly what was being done, and then causing the deaths of the. So it technically wasn't Dane's fault, but whatever. Violet and Rihanna have this moment where she explains, not every secret is mine to tell, blah, blah, blah. We have another weird descriptor here for me. Violet says, I stopped breathing. I know that look. She's thinking. While Rihanna is trying to work out what happened. And then she says, suddenly there's not enough oxygen in the room on the entire continent, but I managed to pull air through my lungs as I face her. I don't know why, but these sort of sentences don't really, when they're together like this, it doesn't make sense. She stopped breathing, and then she has no oxygen, but she manages to pull air into her. It's basically her describing breathing. And then Violet sort of says, don't make me lie to you, to Rihanna, blah, blah, blah. We have her heart pounding so loudly she can hear it in her ears. Eric, who is the son of the king or whatever, he says dragons don't even answer to kings. So again, we have this idea that dragons are kind of above all human law. They do whatever they want, blah, 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 blah. And this is a dream sequence, which has been happening reoccurringly, where Violet is being attacked sort of by the sage from the first book. And the sage is basically saying, all of that power at your fingertips, yet you insist on fleeing over and over using the same failed tactics and expecting what? To escape. There is no escaping me, fight me or die, or join me and live beyond the ages, but you will never escape me, not when I've been waiting for centuries for someone with your power. I will explain this just to avoid spoilers, but we'll circle back to this. There is a loophole being discussed here, but technically this is the sage explaining how powerful Violet is and that he needs her power because she's the first one born in centuries with that power. Next, she's with Xaden again. She's trying to recall a first year's name, and it comes off kind of like douchey in my opinion, where she's like Channing, Chapman, Sharon, shit, I don't know. And it's just Violet has been deciding that she doesn't want to remember the names of all the first years because she doesn't want to deal with the pain of them dying and blah, 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 blah. Xaden's basically accompanying her, and he gets approached by Varish, and he sort of tries to explain that, oh, well, she's on leave. You can't really do anything to her right now. And Varish counters saying, no, you're on leave. You're on leave. And there's also a little point here that I want to make. Xaden says his intentions are pretty fucking clear. Trust me. That is a hint that it's quite on. It's pretty blatant, but later on in the book it makes sense. But Xaden knowing that is sort of a hint at something. Xaden sort of flexes his power a little bit, and then Varish says, well, that's fascinating. No wonder you're so coveted. The pair of you are really quite something. This is, again, the narrative telling us how powerful and how blah, blah, blah they are. Xaden basically tells Varish to fuck off because he's not in his chain of command, which to me just seems a little wonky to me, just because I was in the military. You still have to answer to people that are higher ranked to you, even if they're technically not in your direct chain of command. You still have to show them a modicum of respect. It's sort of expected. And then again, even after Varish has had his dragon almost killed by Violet's dragon, Varish says this again. You're not under my chain of command, but as I had to remind her dragon, she is. This doesn't make sense because the dragon nearly killed his dragon to make the point that the dragon, Taran, is not under Varish's chain of command. And therefore, he can't order Violet around in a way that directly orders the dragons around. He can order Violet around, but he can't order the dragons around. Varish still brings this up constantly, and it's so annoying. And then we have another point where we're describing how menacing Xaden is. Xaden smiles, but it's not the kind that warms my heart. It's the one that chills every cell in my body to ice. The cruel, menacing curve I first saw on the dais when he was my wing leader. Which, again, just to make sure everybody's aware, Xaden never planned to actually kill Violet. So then Violet's basically being taken away for training. Xaden says before they part, Violence, remember, it's only the body that's fragile. You are unbreakable. Unbreakable, she repeats. And it's like, I don't think any person can be considered unbreakable, but whatever. It's kind of like one of those parallels where Violet is notoriously frail, therefore she has an unbreakable constitution, which, as readers know, is not true. She is very, in fact, frail mentally. It's almost absurd. This is the next point of their RCS, their interrogation stuff. They're sort of pulled in by the professor, Professor Grady, and he's explaining to them what's going to happen. While he's doing this, we have to point out again that Violet is extremely powerful. We have to tell the readers, because they might have forgotten it the last couple pages when we explained that, where he says, and Vice Commandant Varus seems to have taken an interest in your squad, no doubt because you have quite the legacy here in Cadet Sorengale. Again, we have Violet being put above everyone else, whatever. They're given like biscuits and jam and a drink, because they all tell each other a secret in order for them to have a secret that the others can spill in order to sort of undo the training. And that's the whole purpose of the interrogation, is to extract those secrets. Rihanna explains that they snuck out and they broke the rules. And then Rydok, dude, I can't say his name. He says, badass, didn't know you had it in you to break the rules, Violet. And then, oh, Violet's full of secrets. And it's just a weird back and forth happening here. Violet tries to, come up with a secret that she has to tell everyone. And of course, everyone looks her way. And then she says, I'm in love with Xaden, which everybody already knows. So they're saying that's not really a secret. So then she reveals that the infantry has been killing civilians on the border. And then Violet, while she's drinking the stuff, right? Or she takes one of the mugs to drink out of it, and she smells it and inexplicably determines that, oh, it's the stuff that cuts off their connection to the dragons. So all of them decide not to drink it in order to retain their connections with their dragons, which this doesn't really make sense to me, just sort of as like an interrogation sense. Because if we're going to be giving them this drink to cut them off from the dragons, there is no reason to not just force feed them it once they are tied down and being interrogated. There is no reason not to do that. And you'll be surprised to learn that they never actually do that. They don't administer the actual thing that severs them from the dragons at any point. Then they sort of pretend that they're disconnected from their dragons. They get interrogated, where one of the people reveals that their signet is the ability to detect when someone's lying. So they tie Violet to the chair and they start like beating her up, and she does what she always does and compartmentalizes the pain and pushes past it, and then she's just like blah blah blah. And the interrogators actually kind of make a good point where they're like, you're the weakest. How did someone as frail as you survive the first year? And the answer is because everybody helped her and she is the main character. They all just kind of go, oh, we're not going to tell you anything. And then they all just kind of get beaten up like a little bit. And then they just get left alone. They get beaten up for a very small amount of time. So I would hardly consider it an interrogation, but it happens. They've been in there. Basically, they've been in the interrogation chamber for... It's almost midnight. They have the rest of the night to go in order for someone to crack. They haven't really been interrogated a whole lot. Violet reaches out to Xaden to ask what time it is. And then the door opens and Varus comes in and he says, doesn't someone usually give up a personal detail by now? And the guards respond, they do, sir. So, wow. The Violet's team is just... They are so unwilling to bend. They are unbreakable. He brings in Dane to try and get Dane to use his memory reading powers on Violet. He refuses to do because he thinks it's morally wrong and it's kind of against the rules. And everybody here kind of learns that Dane's ability is that he can reach into memories, blah, blah, blah. Varus is Dane's teacher. That's revealed because he has a classified signet, which means that Varus' signet is also classified. Once Dane refuses, Varus doesn't really behave kind of like a teacher or a vice commandant or anything. Here's what he says after Dane sort of leaves. Well, that was disappointing and anticlimactic. Fucking rule follower. Back to typical tactics, I guess. Nonsense. Violet gets mended by Nolan. Nolan just sort of, he fixes Violet. While he's there, Varus and Nolan talk about some very secret stuff, which they apparently don't really care about people overhearing, where Varus says, you think the sessions are failing? And Nolan says, I think I've done all I can for him. I'm not going to sit here all day and waste time while she's sleeping. This is another little hint, but it's not a very well hidden plot point. It's pretty obvious and straightforward, in my opinion. Again, I won't spoil it, but try and guess who they're talking about. And then again, dread knots my empty stomach. My stomach flips. We have a lot of this. They basically say Varys is probably going to kill Violet, which is like, whoa, no way. Then they manage to escape because they all still have their signets and all their abilities or whatever. And Violet uses a knife that ends up unlocking the cell so that they can escape. They escape, and then they're like, we want our patch now. And Professor Grady's like, good job. They won. They escaped specifically because Violet used a knife that Xaden gave her, and it just so happened to have the ability to unlock the interrogation room. We're going on further. Dane doesn't look at her. Rihanna explains that First Squad lost someone, that they died during the interrogation. And then it's sort of explained by Carolyn Ashton, that's Jack Barlow's ex-girlfriend, that it took them an entire day to reset the interrogation chamber after their squad left. They walk into the battle brief, and there is propaganda being splayed about, and the propaganda specifically says the blue fire dragons and their riders. We have another oh gods moment here. So Markham comes in, and Markham is explaining why this is all propaganda. He says, come on, who blue dragons? Come on, that's ridiculous. He's specifically deflecting away from the fact that it says blue fire, but whatever. And Violet even notes that. Violet also thinks that Markham is more violent than any rider, because she says, you think riders can be vicious? Words are just as capable of eviscerating someone as a blade, and he's a master. Which is just to say that he's really good at lying. And he's sort of the central propaganda, whatever. We have this whole sequence where he's just deflecting. He's explaining the propaganda. It was all just a test, and they all kind of failed it because they all believed it immediately, blah, blah, blah. But we know it's not a test. It's actually real. Someone was printing it to try and tell everybody. And then we get the big reveal here. Markham says, we didn't want to disappoint you if he could not pull off what will be arguably the greatest achievement of any mender in our history. This is referencing Nolan, who has been mending someone this entire time. He was crushed under the weight of a mountain a few months ago, but Nolan has mended bone after bone to return him to your quadrant. Violet's stomach hollows. No fucking way. Join me in welcoming back your fellow writer, Jack Barlow. And of course, Jack Barlow is there. Her heart is pounding. And they basically say he's definitely going to try and kill you again. This is pretty straightforward. It makes perfect sense. His dragon is still alive. His girlfriend was constantly visiting the Mender. Every time the Mender appeared, he was exhausted. They previously talked about, is the mending working on him? And now we have the reveal that they have mended Jack. Hooray. Now, the thing that doesn't make sense about this to me is that Jack has been missing for months, and he's just welcomed back into the second years as if he hasn't missed the entirety. I'm pretty sure he didn't even do the war games. He missed a lot of their training, and he's just instantly back into the quadrant with no issues. Everybody's just sort of gawking about Jack. Violet just says she's all right. Stop staring. Everyone looks at her again. Violet learns that in a previous attack on the border, where Mira and Xaden both are, a rider has been injured. And she's sort of given the hint that due to someone touching their neck, that it is Xaden that's injured. And she completely loses all composure. And she says, I can't be here. It's impossible to be here when I have to be there. There's no reality outside of me being there. Here doesn't mean anything. It doesn't exist. And then she's rushing to go leave without permission. Again, she's breaking the rules. As she's running to go see Xaden, she whips her dagger from her thigh and spins towards the threat, and Bodhi is there. And she's just on edge, and she's, whoa, always about to stab someone. I don't really like it. And then here we have another little... These things are usually passages that have some relevance to the chapter, where it says, by their third year, a rider must attain full and complete control over their shields. Otherwise, in moments of extreme stress, they are susceptible to not only being influenced by their dragon's emotion, but being controlled by them. I misinterpreted this as something else entirely, but in the first book, Violet was so overwhelmed by her dragon boinking that she was super horny. And now we have the implication that Violet's shields are her shields are the strongest in her entire class. She should be strong enough to block out almost everyone, which for the most part she does, but this is her being controlled by her dragon's emotions. She flies all the way there for 12 hours. She finally sees him. Xaden is there. He's on the map. He's short-sleeved, muscle-hugging, sparring shirt. He's looking amazing again. And Violet's sort of upset at herself for letting her emotions override her common sense, which she blames on herself and not the dragon. Xaden greets her with violence. Are you all right? And then she's sort of angry. And then she's saying, I can't get him out. And she's referencing the dragon. But Violet just said that it wasn't Tarn, it was her, but whatever. She wraps her arms around Xaden and says he smells like mint and leather and mine. And then she says, am I scenting him? And we have more of this like dragon stuff happening. And it's just a little weird for me. I'm not a huge fan of the way that she, again, describes Xaden. Xaden sort of... Xaden gets a little jelly. And he says, who the fuck's flight jacket are you wearing? Because Bodhi gave her his flight jacket. And then she says, it has a 3rd-year rank, 4th wing insignia, and a section leader designation. Who the hell's jacket do you think I'm wearing? It's Bodhi's, you territorial asshole. And then she says, are you serious right now? And then I ran out of the battle brief the second Devour clued me in that you've been wounded. Yes, I left without leave. Then I flew 8 fucking hours at breakneck speed with an absolutely irrational blah, blah, blah. Xaden just kind of pushes all that aside and says, you were worried about me? And then he just keeps saying, you were worried about me? You were worried about me? And then he just keeps repeating this, you were worried about me. And then Violet sort of ends up learning that, okay, Xaden was actually wounded. The thing went out. Violet says, I'm not mad at you for not being hurt. I would never want you hurt. I'm pissed at myself for being so reckless. So I so wrapped up in you having such little control over my emotions that I just ran after you like a love-struck fool. And you're always calm, collected, and control. You would have waited for all the information and sure as hell wouldn't have ever let her emotions take over you. And then Xaden just kind of says, I would have been concerned for you too. And he says, I'm not doing what I should right now, which is hauling your ass to the mat until you're hot and sweaty, aching mess from a dozen rounds of sparring. Because I warned you to never put your life at risk over something as trivial as talking to me, and yet here you are, you did that just again. And then she says, I'm down for everything but the sparring, which again is just like, Violet's just horny, which I guess I understand because Xaden is described as literally the most perfect man ever. He again repeats, you were worried about me. She wants him. I want him to make me forget that there's anything beyond this room or the two of us. He just keeps repeating. They have a sex scene, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, they have a sex scene here. As far as the sex scenes go, I'm not too into it, honestly. Well, I'm just not really too into the sex scenes in this book. They're a little kind of gods. The sex scenes there's so much, it's a lot of talking that's very repetitive and it's kind of cringy. You know what? Here, I'll just read it to you. I want you exactly how you are, emotions and all. I want the woman I fell for. It kills me every time I have to keep my hands off you every night I lie awake next to you, both blessed and damned with the memory of how hot, how wet, how fucking perfect you feel when I'm losing myself in you. And then he says, when I do sleep, I dream of the sounds you make right before you come, and the way your blue eyes outshines the amber right after, all satiated and heavy. I wake up starving for you, only you, even on the mornings you're halfway across the kingdom. This isn't me denying you or manipulating you. This is me fighting for you. And then this is basically, Xaden doesn't want to have meaningless sex with her. He wants to have an emotional connection with her, and he can't do that unless she loves him. And then Violet basically leverages this and says, like, look, I've been flying for 8 hours. I want you right now, so you can either have me right now or not have me, period. They doink. And gods, look at you. Harder, deeper. Don't treat me like I'm breakable. Gods, I feel you everywhere. I want everything. I don't want it to end. I can't give this up. I won't give you up. Now let go. Perfect. Just when I think I can handle you, I completely lose it. Why does that not surprise me? You'll be the death of me. I just don't like it. I'm just not into it. And then Xaden kind of explains while they're walking that she's somewhat of an emotional inconvenience. It's kind of funny. And then Xaden says she's a prize annoyance at the moment, blah, blah, blah. There's a weird descriptor here that says our trust is as thin as December ice, which I don't, whatever. They meet up with some of the griffins, and they're once again giving the weapons out. And Violet sees a girl that is sort of, she's eyeing Xaden, and she's like, wow, 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 I'm really into Xaden. The girl sort of uses Xaden's name. Violet is keying into this the whole time. She's sort of just standing there. They're arguing about the wards and how they're going to be getting weapons and all this stuff. One of the writers says, you'll condemn us all to death. And then Violet says, you'll condemn us all to death if you take down the wards standing between the Venom and the hatching grounds. they'd be unstoppable. The girl chimes in again, and it's revealed to be Kat. Her name is Kat. I don't know if you remember that name, but Kat is the name of Katiana. It is Xaden's ex. And then she makes the remark, she's striking, I'll give you that. Violet just says, what the fuck? Again, I'm just not into the way Violet talks. Xaden's morals are all over the place. They say, so you'd rather we die while you sit protected behind the very weapon that could save our civilians? And Xaden says, yes, and shrugs. This is war, Xaden continues. People die in wars. So if you're asking if I'd rather your people die than mine, then obviously my answer is yes. It's foolish to think we can save everyone. We can't. And then Violet says, it's not the first time I've heard him express the sentiment. He feels the same way about the marked ones who won't work to save themselves at Bargduril, blah, blah. Which is Xaden basically saying he's okay with a bunch of people dying, even though he's leading the revolution, which doesn't make any sense. Kat says, you're willing to let our entire kingdom fall prey to these monsters because you're what? Smitten? Please, I know you better than that. And Violet is sort of slow on the uptake here and says she thinks she's talking about her, but obviously she is. And then they point out this little thing that doesn't make a whole lot of sense where they say, we're all that stands between them and you. You know that, right? Or are you still hiding your heads in the don't tell us too much in case we're going to be interrogated sand like you were last year? So Xaden was also not giving himself a whole lot of information last year because he was afraid of that information coming out during the interrogation, but they still let Violet go into the interrogation knowing everything she knows. They still let all of them go into the interrogation, which again just doesn't make sense. And then, okay, right before they leave, Sinera, who is the leader of the whatever you want to call it, the drift of griffins, she says, tell your dragon he's the scariest fucking thing I've ever seen, Soren Gale. So again, we have a point where Violet is being just told how powerful and scary and impressive she is all the time, forever, always. Okay, as they're flying back, Xaden and Violet have this brief conversation where they're like, was that your ex-girlfriend? To which he's like, yeah, it is. Violet's sort of feeling jealousy, anxiety, and insecurity. And Taran responds, I will remind you that not a single dragon chose her. You were selected by 2. Pull yourself together. This is, again, the plot telling us how important and special Violet is because 2 dragons chose her. But as we come to learn, dragons' choices don't really make a whole lot of sense. That Xaden says, besides weaponry and a private army, you're the first lightning wielder in over a century, and he swears he'll let us take the luminary if he can see you wield. So Violet is again being told how special she is. The guy who's kind of like the collector or whatever, he really wants to see Violet wield her signet, and he's willing to give them something they desperately need if Violet will show him her signet. And then here's a point where, again, Xaden circles back and makes no sense. He says, I told you in Eteria, I would rather lose this entire war than live life without you. I didn't think you meant it when you said it, Violet is saying that. I love this man with every beat of my reckless heart, which would be his if he'd simply stop keeping all his secrets and let me know him. Xaden saying he would rather lose the entire war than sacrifice Violet makes 0 sense. We're talking about the entire world, and he's willing to sacrifice it for Violet. Whatever. Violet again has this point where she says, I'm a lightning wielder. I'm never defenseless against the Venenin, which is, again, the plot telling us how powerful she is. Xaden gives her another knife, blah, blah, blah. And she has to keep it in a secret compartment, this is just a plot device for the next part. They land, and Varish is there. Everybody's kind of there, and they're all kind of mad at Sorengale because she disappeared. Now, here's another point. This is another point where the plot is favoring Sorengale because Imito, he's the one that's been training them on the mat. He's a professor. He says, I do not have favorites. That would be foolish in this place. But if I did, and I'm not saying I do, but if I did, I would suggest that favored student that she stresses the undimmable bond of her legendary battle dragon and forgets any mention that perhaps strengthening her mental shields could have saved her from such a rash decision when it came to departing without leave. But I would also hope that another favored student, were I to have such a thing, would be teaching you stronger shielding techniques so it doesn't happen. So Emitio, or whatever, is just saying that he is giving preferential treatment to Violet and Xaden because they're both his favorite students. Varish appears, and he basically says, you're in violation of, you're dressed like an officer because she's wearing Xaden's jacket. And Professor Cowrie is there, and he's trying to run interference for Violet again, because all the professors have to favor Violet. They have to treat her better than everyone else. Boris says it's a jacket. She's in violation of Article 7, Section 3, which states that impersonating a commissioned officer, and then Violet cuts him off by saying, it's Article 2, actually. And it says impersonating a commissioned officer is a punishable offense, not wearing someone's flight jacket. As you can see, I'm not wearing anyone's name tag, nor am I claiming to be someone I'm not. And then Kari says, she has you there, Vice Commandant. So again, we have another point where Soaring Gale, Violet, is just being explained to be so much better. She's better at knowing the Codex than the guy that is in charge. He is the Vice Commandant, and he doesn't even know the Codex, but she does. She knows it enough to counter him. And I would be okay with this. I'd be okay with this if Violet wasn't just like inexplicably good at everything and surviving anything that comes her way. She sort of is. Her jacket is searched, which is kind of concerning because it has the blade in it that she's not allowed to have. And then this is where we reveal, Rhiannon used her summoning ability to pull the blade out of the back of the jacket. And this is where everybody's like, oh my God, you finally managed to pull something through walls. That's impressive. And then Rhiannon's like, no, Violet, explain to me what this is. And then Violet finally explains it's for killing Venom. And Violet has finally started to tell her friends the truth. I also highlighted this just because I didn't like this passage. It says, barring invasion, only riders and designated scribes are permitted in the Riders' Quadrant. To enter uninvited as infantry or even healer is to welcome a swift death, which is saying that if you're infantry or a healer, a medic, and you go into the Riders' Quadrant without permission, they can kill you. Whatever. Violet starts this chapter by saying, I tell them everything. But then the narrative later says, so I tell them almost everything, which that just bothers me. And then they kind of talk about how the dragons are not really taking an official stance because they would be putting their riders in danger if they told them the truth. And then Violet here, another point of how powerful she is, she says, there are things I can't tell you, at least not until you're all capable of shielding Dane out, which means she is capable of it, but none of them are. This is kind of like a weird little, like, we're all friends moment where she's like, you guys should be angry at me. You should hate me. And they're all like, we're not angry. We're in this together. We're going to do it forever. And then they all decide to work together here. And the way that they're going to work together is they're going to go through the archives and look through books to try and find explanations on how to raise the wards. And Violet says, We'll be able to read 4 times as fast and cover 4 times as many books. Which, for the record, if they all don't have the same academic ability as Violet, it doesn't make sense to have them scouring through books where they could miss crucial details, which later on in the book becomes very important because Violet herself misses a crucial detail that unravels the whole plot. So having everyone go through the books when they're not as good at studying, self-explained, by the way, they all admit that they're not as good at this as Violet is. Having them help her doesn't make sense. But whatever. We get a little Deus Ex Machina here where Roderick explains during the first book when they invaded her mom's office for the little squad test or whatever it was, he discovered that there were 2 journals that were hidden in her. There's a classified ledger or something, and there's a sub-level vault where there's 2 things that they could definitely get, and they need them. And now they've decided they're basically going to do a heist. There's this part that kind of bothers me where Violet says, Taran is really upset because he can't see Xaden's dragon during this period. And she says, I can't blame him. I might not have a mating bond, but I'd chew my own arm off if it meant I had 5 minutes to talk to Xaden. Like, come on. You'd chew your arm off for 5 minutes to talk to the guy? I'm sorry. Am I the only one that feels like it's too much? It's just too much. We're at the threshing now. We're waiting for people to see who bonds to their dragons. The Blue Tail Club is bonded to Eric. The Sloan bonds to a Red Tail, just like Liam did. Roderick is basically like, hey, let's go bang some people. And then he's like, oh, yeah, you're only celebrating with Rorson and blah, blah, blah. And then Violet's kind of she's on like guard duty or something with someone. And then all these soldiers come out. They're all infantry. And they're like, we were paid well for a specific message we're about to deliver. And then this is another point that just bothers me because Violet says, this is Violet being unlikable. She says, let me guess, secrets die with the people who keep them. And then they blink in surprise and she's like, it's not as original as you think. And then rapid fire, she flicks 2 daggers and kills 2 of them. They fight. her friend basically dies. She's thrown off the edge and she's like about to die. The infantry guy's like trying to knock her off. And then someone stabs him from behind and pulls her up. And oh my God, it's Jack Barlow. Jack Barlow has saved her, and he saved her from assassination. And he says, that death was kind of like a second chance for me. You don't know who you really are until you face down Malik. That's their like god of death. So the way I see it is you just gave me a second chance and we're even. Jack saved her. Xaden, the next chapter starts with Xaden sort of glaring at her because Violet has basically told him that she spilled the secret. Xaden's really mad. The way she describes him again is just, those beautiful eyes, and he's counting. She's just saying, say something. He's choosing his words carefully, blah, blah, blah. They have this moment where they're like, we're gonna do this together. I'm gonna help you with your little. This bothers me because it says, this is something else entirely, something that scares the shit out of me, and yet I can't bring myself to pull away, even in the name of self-preservation. I'm choosing him, choosing us. There will be no calling this a lapse in judgment or the result of too much adrenaline or even lust. I love him. No matter what he's done or why he did it, I still love him, and I know he cares about me. But then it says, maybe it isn't love. And it's like, it doesn't make any sense, whatever. They pull Eric into the room to sort of like explain to them, like, hey, we need your help with something. And Eric is sort of like, you think I'm going to help you? And he's pointing at Xaden. And then he explains, you have no idea what he did to Alec, who is Eric's brother. And he says, your brother, or Xaden says, your brother was a craven, murderous prick. And I'm not sorry I killed him. And then he slams the door. And it's like, Violet says, oh shit, I did not see that coming. It's like, I don't understand how Xaden, whatever, dude. We're just going through this. So Xaden killed Eric's brother, apparently during the quadrant trials or whatever. They're all gathered together. They're performing their heist. They're slipping into the archives under the guise. Everyone's kind of like, whoa, I thought Xaden was going to kill those guards. And Imogen says, wouldn't have surprised me, might have been more sufficient. And everyone whips their heads in her direction while she shrugs. We're going into the archives. We're following the Mage Light. We're trying to find the two hidden journals in the hidden sublevel of the archives. They're just going through all the journals. Imogen is basically, like, she's not surprised that Violet keeps secrets, blah, blah, blah. Eric kind of implies that him, Dane, and Violet grew up together, which I think is so weird. We eventually find the hidden journals or whatever. The ward, there was a ward around it. It closes, and it's like, it's going to kill them if they stay inside it. Xaden saves Auric from being crushed in the ward just before the door shuts. They all made it. Hooray. They all have the journals. There's this random point here where we have this exposition dump, which is very crucial information. This happens randomly where the information is given in a not so subtle way. So Quinn basically has the ability to make herself look like people. And she says, my signet is stronger because Kurth was my great aunt's dragon, but she's not a direct descendant, so I don't have to worry about going mad like those dragons who bond in direct familial lines. Dragons aren't supposed to even get close to family lines for that exact reason. Like they listen to human rules. I still can't get the... And then she comments on the shade of Imogen's hair, which is pink. Xaden's kind of like, I wish I could spend the night. He says in that gravelly tone that instantly turns me on. Whatever. Nolan comes out of nowhere, and he's offering a wineskin and a mug to Violet. And she was like, oh, I'm going to get some lemonade. And he gives her lemonade. And she drinks it because her throat has been burning since they've been in the archives. This is just a plot device because it turns out that the stuff that he gave her was poisoned with the signet cutting off ability thing, blah, blah, blah. The thing that she previously could detect via smell, but now she can't really detect it at all. And she just drinks it. And then Varish comes in and he's like, ha ha ha, gotcha. Because Violet had the journal on her that she is not allowed to have. Where we last left off, Violet had basically taken the lemonade from Nolan and it poisoned her, and now she's cut off from her dragon and Xaden, and she is being taken away to be interrogated. She wakes up inside an interrogation room. She is currently being interrogated. This is just a little weird to me that Violet would obviously previously she was able to identify the smell of the agent or alchemy that they're using in order to sort of cut off the rider's connection with their dragons, but Then when she's given lemonade, we have this little plot device where her throat is so scratchy that she doesn't even think about it. And she just chugs it down immediately, which is fine, whatever. We kind of have to keep things rolling. She sort of realizes Nolan did this. And then she acknowledges how it was stupid to assume that they could enter the secret guarded archives and not trip a ward, which, yeah, kind of makes sense. But it's also kind of like acknowledging the characters are kind of stupid sometimes, but the plot is very convenient in helping them get away with a lot of these things. Varish is the one that is torturing her. He is using Nora with her ability to discern whether or not someone is telling the truth or not. Varish kind of implies that his whole plan is for Xaden to kind of lose control. Violet acknowledges something that really just, it totally contradicts everything that we've already talked about, stuff that's already happened, where she says specifically in reference to Xaden, he can't risk the movement, he won't. Xaden's priorities have always been clear, and damn if that's not one of the things I love about him. That's in reference to Violet saying that Xaden won't come after her. Keep in mind, previously, we had Xaden explicitly say he would allow pretty much everybody on the continent to die if it meant Violet surviving. We have another sequence here where the plot sort of acknowledges that Violet is very good at shielding and that her shielding is super powerful. And then again, we have Xaden sort of acknowledging that Varish is wrong because Xaden won't come. He'll choose the safety of the revolution. I'm now one of the people he can't save. I just have to hope that everyone is wrong and that he'll survive my death. This is in reference to Xaden and Violet being bonded together. So therefore, if Violet dies, Xaden should technically die because it would kill Taran, which would kill Xaden's dragon, which would kill him. Again, we have Violet claiming that Xaden would not sacrifice anything for her. He's all about the revolution. That's all he cares about. Just to clarify this, okay? This is on page 327 that Violet says, Xaden won't come. He'll choose the safety of the revolution. I'm now one of the people he can't save. I just have to hope that everyone's wrong and he'll survive my death. And then prior to that, on page 325, she says, he can't risk the movement. He won't. Xaden's priorities have always been clear, and damn if that's not one of the things I love about him. On page 228, Xaden says, I told you in Eteria, I would rather lose this entire war than live without you. And Violet says, I didn't think you meant it when you said that. But he did. He did mean that. So right here we have the narrative just not acknowledging what Xaden has already told Violet. There's this habitual, forget, characters just kind of forget what's being said because on this page, Violet's like, oh, Xaden would never do that. And then previously, he said explicitly, I will let everything fall to the ground if it means you surviving. Dane comes in and he gets kind of coaxed into finally using his signet on Violet to peer into her and see her memories. During this, Violet sort of attempts to show Dane specific memories in order to sort of bring him to their side, which does end up working. Dane turns on Varish and sort of helps Violet escape. Dane encounters Nora and he says, if you let us pass, you'll live. And then a low menacing voice says, I make no such promises, and it weakens Violet's knees. I look up into the wrath of Dune in the form of gold-flecked onyx eyes. That's just Xaden. Xaden's there. Xaden is basically about to kill Dane when Violet tells him no. They have this little cute little moment, whatever. Then they sort of offer Violet the right to kill Varish, and Violet happily takes it and stabs him in the chest while he's wounded on the ground, which is weird. And then I stare and stare as the weight of everything that's happened closes in on me, threatening to steal my air. She just killed the vice commandant of the quadrant. Wowie. And Xaden risked everything by coming here, which we've already acknowledged that Xaden does. And then Violet points this out again and says, you'll lose everything you've worked for because of me. And then he repeats the line that he said earlier, I will happily watch Eteria burn to the ground if it means you live. And then she says, you don't mean that. And he says, I do. I pointed this out during a Court of Thorn and Roses, where the character Feyre in that book has a conversation with the guy whose name I already forgot. And he explicitly says, your family is safe, everything's fine. And she seemingly forgets it, and then 30 pages later they have the exact same conversation, and this time she accepts it, which is just nonsense. To me, it sort of reads like the author just forgot what they wrote, because again, Xaden already confirmed that he would burn the place to the ground. It already happened on what, page 280, and it happens again on page 337 where he repeats it again. He's saying the same thing that he said earlier. This is really just a narrative issue where we're having the same conversation, and there's no variance in the conversation. It's the same concept being exchanged, just one character is blatantly ignoring it. Why? We don't know. Xaden tells Violet, I will watch this place burn for you. Violet says he won't risk this place. He wasn't being serious. And then Xaden says it again. And then she says, you don't mean that. But he does mean that. It's just nonsense. So Xaden has pretty much been wreaking havoc and dropping dead wyverns everywhere to sort of like pull back the veil and reveal to everyone what has truly been happening in the war. He attacked the place with Garrick. Violet's mother appears, and she sort of holds Garrick as hostage and demands that she be able to talk to Violet, which she does. Xaden, for some reason, is like not allowing Violet to talk to her mom, even though her mom explicitly is the one that ordered the protection of Violet, so it doesn't really make sense. Xaden sort of says that you allowed Violet to be tortured for days, but Violet's mother said she had no idea that this was happening, and if she did, she would have stopped it. So this is just Xaden being an asshole for no particular reason, being overprotective and stealing autonomy from Violet, blah, blah, blah. Violet's mother is sort of trying to justify why she's been lying this whole time. Violet's mother explains that the deal that she made with Xaden was that she had to be able to survive all on her own. No one could kill her outside of a challenge, and then Xaden would have to protect her. That was pretty much it. Xaden protected her from dying of her own naivety during the whatever. They go back with Xaden, and they go back to the academy, and they are trying to coax all the riders and the teachers into joining them in the rebellion or revolution, whatever you want to call it. Violet has her Deus Ex Machina, where she tells her dragon to just share the memory with everybody, including the dragons, so that they can all understand what's happening. And then Xaden gives this like lame little speech, which is just boring. Everybody kind of like agrees, blah, blah, blah. We learn that Bodhi's signet can counter other signets because one of the professors tries to throw flames at him, and he just kind of extinguishes it, blah, blah, blah. The dragon or the professors come out, and they basically say, Devora specifically says, oh, we won't stop you. In fact, some of us have been waiting to join you, which is like, dude, the professors have so much power, and for them to be like, oh, we were waiting for some of the students to start a rebellion is just nonsense to me. They fly back with like 200 riders or something. She brings them to her brother, Brennan, and is like, hey, you said you needed riders, and here's all your riders. They brought like 200 of them. That's the end of part 1. We're on to part 2. We have another nightmare sequence again with blah, blah, blah. Violet wakes up, and she sees Xaden, and her first thought is, gods, he is beautiful, and he loves me. Xaden and Violet have this cute little moment, and they're just sort of whatever, and I'm not really too interested in it. Violet actually performs oral sex on Xaden for the first time. Hooray! It rarely ever happens. The one thing that I'll say about these encounters is I don't like the way they talk to each other during their sex scenes. This is another sex scene, and it's basically, this is just the dialogue. That feels so fucking good. Fuck. You have to stop, or I'm going to lose it on you. I'm not sure I can be gentle. I don't want gentle. Mending bones isn't instant. You're still healing. You really want this? I want you feral. Gods, yes. And then we have, again, this is sort of the way that they talk. They've already had this exact same exchange in like the prior sex scene where Violet's like, I want you to be, don't treat me like I'm fragile. I know. And then Xaden says like, I know exactly how much you can take. This is so, it's constant. It's just a repetition over and over and over. We have please, gods, you're so perfect. Blah, blah, blah. I want them all to know you're mine. They basically boink it out behind a sound barrier. And then they go to the council, and the council's kind of like, they're just having a little fit over the fact that they brought them 200 riders because they didn't want 200 riders. And they're sort of mocking the people that have come. And then Zayden just says cadets who are acting with more composure than you are get a grip, and he's he talks down to everybody because he's like the king or whatever. Zayden now has a new scar or something. It's the same length as the ones on his back. Zayden isn't responsible just for the marked ones anymore. He's responsible for me, which is, I mean, he already kind of was. Then again, we have the implication here that Zayden is actually the king. He's the emperor or whatever you want to call it of this place. He is the seventh ruler in the realm. Everything's his. This house is his. Everything's his. He is in charge. Blah blah blah. Violet's other dragon is kind of like crippled in a weird way. She like can't fly properly, basically. She'll eventually be able to fly one day, they say, but she'll never be able to bear a rider. So whatever. We have another battle brief because that's right. We have decided to go right back to college. We're just treating this like normal college again. Violet sort of says it's all my fault. She's responsible for the wing, for blah blah blah, and just complaining. Violet sort of implies that, well, the ward stone might be some sort of blood magic, and then Brennan gives this speech to the people that's like, when you graduate, you'll be allowed to fight in the war, which doesn't make sense because he says we don't send cadets to die, but the world is allegedly gonna end if you agree with Brennan in 6 months. So why would he be refusing help? Who knows? And here we have another moment where Violet is just sort of pointed out to be so much better than everyone else, right? He says, "You will all die. Are you really so anxious to start a new death toll?" And then someone replies, Soren Gale and the others didn't die. And then Professor Devora says, "When you wield lightning, come and talk to me." Because, of course, Violet is just so much better. Violet sort of propositions a question to Roderick so that Brennan can have this moment where he glances at me like he knows the question is mine because it's such a smart question and only Violet could think of those smart questions. Mira finally arrives and they have this encounter where she's joining the rebellion now, and Mira apologizes for not for not believing Violet when they were at Samara or whatever. And then Violet just says, I needed you. But if you remember in that conversation, Violet didn't even really specifically tell Mira everything. She just said, oh, hypothetically, what if it's the Wyverns? And then Mira, of course, completely just is like, yeah, that's totally fake. It doesn't make sense. And then Violet just gives up. But of course, we got to guilt her. Mira and Brennan meet. Mira punches Brennan in the face. They have this awkward conversation. Zayden is here. And then Zayden and Violet do this thing again where they sort of make out directly in front of Brennan and Mira. And Brennan points out how this is weird. He's like, seriously, right in front of me. And Mira says, oh, this is tame for them. Which, again, I just think it's weird that they just do that stuff directly in front of their family. Like, they're full on making out. It's a little weird. Violet says she needs the blood of the 6 most powerful riders in order to jumpstart the ward stone in order to fix it. And then, of course, we have another point where Zayden says that Violet isn't just a cadet. She's a cadet that can raise wards, so they should listen to her. And then we have another point in the plot where we point out how powerful Violet is by saying, by our best calculations, the most 6 powerful riders currently in Atira are Zayden, Felix, Suri, Bodhi, Violet, and me. Brennan saying that. We have another awkward violence for Zayden. There's this scene here where, so Violet's plan to raise the wards has failed. She doesn't really know what to do, and she's sort of lost. And Brennan sort of points out that she looks a specific way. And he says, you have the same look that you had when you were 8 years old when you stared Mom down over a plate of squash for 12 straight hours. 12 hours. Dad said go to bed, that you weren't going to eat them, and Mom said you weren't going to sleep until you did. When I got up the next morning, Mom and Dad were both asleep at the table and you were snacking on bread and cheese. I know that face, Violet. When you dig in about something, you're more tenacious than all of us put together. So no, I won't be going away. Obviously, the implication is that an 8-year-old Violet managed to stay awake longer than her battle-hardened general mother, who demanded that she eat squash, and Violet won at the end of the day by both the parents being asleep and Violet was eating cheese and bread. I just think that's total nonsense to include in a book. It doesn't make the character seem more tenacious or whatever, but we also have to point out that Violet is more tenacious than everyone put together because she is the main character. We have to make her seem that way. Violet is sort of being trained in order to be like the strongest, or she's being trained in order to use her signet because she still doesn't know how to use it properly. And this, she's being trained by Felix. And we have another point where the plot points out how powerful Violet is, where he specifically says, "You are slated to be the most powerful rider of your year, perhaps your entire generation, and yet you are just a glorified light show." And then we have another point here where he points out, "Knowing Carr, I'd say he's scared shitless of you. After all, you just took half of their cadets without even a plan. You brought down Bangladesh on a whim, no less. You were the one who did." And then he sort of implies that she wielded Zayden. She used Zayden like a weapon. Blah blah blah. "I'm not just powerful because he loves me. Power isn't found in our signets. Blah blah blah." Violet says, "I'm the menace everyone thinks Zayden is. He might be a weapon, but I'm a natural disaster." Her training sort of goes on. And then she again points out here, I kind of miss when he wanted to kill me. At least then he didn't insist on hovering. But again, we know Zayden never wanted to kill her, so these are just weird things. They go to meet the Griffins or whatever. Taran is saying they're inferior. Mira's with her. Violet has a plan to sort of get the Luminary. They imply that the flyers of the Griffins have lesser magic, but it's sort of mind work, and they imply that they're stronger than most riders in that area, which is fine. We have another point here where the plot tells us how dangerous Violet is because we have this sequence. "We know who you are," the tall flyer in the center interrupts in the common tongue, studying the three of us as if assessing which is the biggest threat. His attention lands on my wind-ravaged cornet braid and his posture changes slightly, taking on the most casual of battle stances. "Guess I win." So again, we have Violet just being pointed out by the plot as being the most dangerous one there. They go to meet the Collector or whatever, and Zayden's already there. And he says, "You aren't where I left you, Violence." And then they sort of have another argument, blah, blah, blah. We have this is just weird that the narrative just keeps saying this, like, we are definitely the topic of conversation as we walk by. It's like, I don't know why everybody has to think we're so cool all the time, no matter what. Eventually, it's revealed that, oh my god, Katarania, Zayden's ex, is there. And she's not just beautiful from a distance, she is jaw-droppingly attractive. And then we have this thing again where we're trying to like kind of imply that Zayden wanted her dead at some point, where he says, "I wasn't in love with you then during the gauntlet threshing. I had no idea what you would become to me. And he couldn't kill me thanks to the deal he made with Mom, the deal he wasn't trusting me with." So again, even she acknowledges that he wasn't trying to kill her, but we keep bringing this up. They go to a gala or something, and Violet wears a black dress. Mira has this moment where she threatens to kill Kat for no particular reason, and she says, "I was going to remind you that it's probably bad manners to stam our hostess, but you know what?" She shrugs. "Fuck it, we don't need a Luminary." And then Kat blinks at Mira. Blah, blah, blah. And then we have another one where Mira points out, "I can kill just as easy in a gown as leathers. Want to see?" Only a fool would call Mira's expression a smile, which is, again, blah, blah, blah. And then we have another point where they point out how Sorengale is tough because of Mira. Violet is she's feeling insecure, and she's comparing herself to Kat. And she says, "I never judge myself against other women when it comes to how we look. How we fight, sure. Ride, definitely. But nothing ever as shallow as appearance. Being pretty doesn't save you at Baskalath." But being pretty did save Violet. I've pointed this out before. If Violet wasn't conventionally attractive and pretty, a lot of her stuff would have ended in her dying. That is an absolute fact that cannot be refuted. Zayden falling in love with her almost explicitly is directly related to her being attractive. And then we have another point here where the plot is pointing out how important Violet is, where they says, "You're all a year older than Violet, and it's been longer than that since you two were together. He's just a man, but she's the best weapon we have against the Dark Wielders." Again, and we have this weird line right here. I don't like the way that Violet describes her relationship with Zayden, because she says, "I locate him within a heartbeat because he's the center of my gravity." And that theme is repeated later on, and I just don't like it. She finds out that Kat was using her mind abilities, which Kat can influence emotions, and she was making Violet feel jealous and insecure and anger and blah, blah, blah. "Guilt settles on my chest with the weight of a dragon." The Collector or whatever, who is Katarina's uncle, basically says, "Okay, I'll give you the Luminary if you can stay in the arena and strike the target, then we'll talk about it." Violet's going to go down to the arena, and she's going to try and use her lightning to strike the target, which is this old wooden chest kind of thing. And the doors of the chest are opened once she gets down on the field, and it's revealed to actually be a venom inside. Mira sees the venom and she instantly throws her dagger at it. Violet's like, no, because you can't kill the venom with a normal dagger. And then the venom now has a knife. We have this moment where Violet sort of combat readies herself, where she grabs her hair into a low ponytail and wraps the fabric from her dress around. She like rips the fabric off her dress. And then we have another sequence here. This is almost an exact repeat of whenever Violet encountered the assassins, and she says like, oh yeah, I already heard the message. It's not that original. Where the sage or the venom is saying, I promise you'll wish. And then she says, for death. Already heard it. I killed the messenger too. It's just a very unlikable exchange. She doesn't sound cool. She grabs her dagger, the one that can kill the venom apparently, and throws it. But then this line comes up. Shit, I didn't account for the downward pressure of the driving rain. Okay. Brennan's there. They're sort of all fighting. Violet, again, she redeems herself. I throw the daggers at the venom simultaneously, this time calculating for the force of the rain. And then Taran sweeps down and saves her from like the killing death blaze or whatever. She finds Xaden has basically lifted the Viscount, who is the collector or whatever, and he's basically threatening to kill him with his shadow powers. And then Violet says, you know, if you'd put Xaden in that kind of danger, I'm not so sure I would be as merciful. Then again, we have another point here where someone is forcing someone else to apologize to Violet, okay? Xaden's demanding the guy apologize, and then she says, I'm fine. He's taking this too far. He's the second in line to the throne. You don't have to do this. Xaden basically forces the guy to apologize to her. We have this weird line here where she says, if I'd just watch him face down a venom, I'd probably be in his fucking lap right now, which is like, whatever. They all say how powerful she is. Makes the deal that they have to bring some of the griffins with them in order to allow them to have the luminary and blah, blah, blah. They decide to go through the griffins version of kind of like the parable, which is climbing this 12-hour climb because the griffins can't fly in like certain altitudes for some reason or whatever. And then they have to complete it. And Violet says 12 hours of constant climbing is going to torture my knees and ankles. I don't think Violet would be able to realistically complete this journey in any stretch, but whatever. Again, we have Taran basically saying, you were chosen by dragons. That is enough. That is more than enough reason for whatever. They kind of point out that the griffins have a similar test, although when they fall off their mountain or whatever, they land in the water and then they just swim back to shore and they can like try again. Marin points out that it's you all who are the weird ones, killing your cadets on conscription day, which again is weird. It is weird. It's super weird. We point out this one character whose name is Luella. She's the nicest of the griffins, right? I wonder what's going to happen to her. Luella dies, of course. She falls, and it's kind of blamed. It's blamed on Violet. We have another point where Violet points out, it's how I killed an entire horde of them at Resson because that's blah, blah, blah. They're standing at another like reading of like a death toll, and they say, this is cruel. Telling us our siblings and our friends are dead this way is fucking cruel. It's harsher than anything we've been put through at Baskalalath, which is just not true objectively. Your friends are dying. Every day you're faced with certain death. I don't think whatever. Rhiannon has been fighting people. Sawyer points out, I still can't believe Feathertails are kids or that you bonded two black dragons. Violet just says that one caught me off guard too, which is again just everyone being like, oh my god. Here we have another point where this is just something that bothers me. The narrative refers to Rhiannon and then and then Rhiannon and then and then and it interchanges constantly and it's just annoying. We have another every writer looks at me moment, which I get really tired of. Professor Trisha acknowledges how impressive that it is that Violet can read the old language. They all exchange a series of what the fuck glances. They're learning how to make runes to contain certain magic. They decide they're gonna like meld the units together for some reason, and Rhiannon and her crew, which includes Violet, are like squads are sacred, squads are family, squads are born, blah blah blah. We do not bend, and we definitely do not blend. Yes, they do. It's stupid to even say that. We are Iron Squad, and we'll act like it. Whatever. It doesn't make any sense. Violet sort of gets challenged to a fight by Kat, who Kat is suspiciously fighting exactly like Xaden. Oh my god. Violet's struggling to fight her because she fights like Xaden and whatever. Xaden kind of comes out of nowhere and sort of saves Violet from this like encounter because she's like super angry, she's super annoyed. Kat is basically saying that she used to be engaged to Xaden. She's going after him specifically because she wants the crown, which is the royalty. He is the king, blah blah blah. Violet sort of clings to the love I feel for him with my fucking fingernails to keep from letting the anger consume me. And then Xaden takes her into the throne room, and then he performs cunnilingus on her, which is amazing. She loves it. Blah blah blah. Oh my god, look at how beautiful you are, coming for me. Oh my god, gods, I'm gonna die right here. I can't take it. You can. Xaden has this moment where he sort of pushes his thoughts into her, and it's just, I love her so fucking much. God, she's heaven in my mouth, flawless mind. Blah, 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 blah. It's just whatever. And then Xaden is sort of like obviously aroused, and Violet's like, come here, let's like take care of you. And then he's like, I'm hanging on by a thread, so I'm begging you, please don't. I need to show you that I'm capable of worshiping your body without reciprocation. You're not a convenient placeholder for me to fuck. Which is like, oh my god, dude, just have sex. This is so stupid. Violet and Xaden's relationship and interactions are just so forced to me. It's just so... I'm just not interested in any of this. I'm just not interested in it. Xaden kind of says like, yeah, he was with Kat, but he never fucked her with his tongue. So it's like, ooh. Violet's squad is the strongest squad. No surprises there. They get melded with Kat's drift because they're the strongest drift. Violet sort of makes a snide comment at Kat about how the fingers really worked with Xaden, really helps that. And then kind of here we have a plot point here where Dane acknowledges that Violet skipped. You, out of all people, didn't read a book from start to finish, which is absurd if you think about it, given the context of what we have about Violet's characters, that she should probably be reading everything very thoroughly and being like super particular about everything, but she missed a very crucial thing. Her and Dane together have started studying together. Again, we have Tarn saying, I chose you, and dragons make no mistakes, which is totally wrong. Xaden makes a dick joke. I bet we get 7 inches tonight, maybe more if you're good. You're making dick jokes? You're talking about the weather. Dane and Violet successfully translated it, and they said, it's not Iron Rain, it's Iron Flame, which, oh my god, that's the title of the book, is Iron Flame. We have the title drop. Violet says that she thinks that Xaden will act in the best interest of Tyrandor, and then she says she leaves herself out of the equation, which is kind of crucial to consider. So they're basically considering treason in order to try and raise the wards because Violet has a new idea. She again has the dream of the sage, and the sage says, "Show me the power you used to slay our forces above the trading post. Prove to me that you are the weapon worth watching, worth retrieving. We should kill you before you grow into your full abilities." The sage is basically saying they're going to turn evil for love, which is whatever. They're on a training thing with Kat, and they encounter Solaris, which is Varish's dragon. This kind of bothers me. Here's another point where we're pointing out to the plot that Violet is so cool. It says, I hate that you're so badass, Sloane suggests. Powerful, Kat admits. They paired us because I'm supposedly the most powerful rider in the squad, I tell her. Solaris gets killed by Adriana. Violet saves Kat from Solaris. Xaden's super angry that Violet would save Kat, and Violet says she saved her because she's third in line. And then Xaden's just like angry, and he says, all I want is you, blah, blah, blah. And then they finally talk about the deal he made with her mother. Because I let you live long enough for us to fall in love, he says. But again, he already said that he wasn't going to kill her, so I don't really care. It's a very long, just like diatribe, this word vomit from Xaden, which is like Xaden and Violet just have these word vomits back and forth that's just like long extent. It's like basically those text messages you get that are just an entire wall, and it's complete nonsense. She says, because I want to think that you kept me alive those first few months before the threshing because you were intrigued or impressed or attracted to me like I was to you, and not because you made a deal with my mother, because it's horrifying to think that the only reason you fell in love with me is because of her. Because you're right, and I didn't have that particular truth, since I know there's a thin line between devotion and obsession, between cowardice and self-preservation, and I'm walking it when it comes to you. I love you so fucking much that I ignored every warning signal last year, and now half the time I don't know what side of that line I'm standing on because I'm too busy looking at you to watch my own feet, blah, blah, blah. And then Violet sort of confronts Xaden and says, what's your second signet? Because they learned Sloane developed the ability to energy siphon. And another character at one point previously basically said that she has a stronger ability due to the dragon having bonded with like her great grandfather or something like that. And if it's a direct bond of the lineage, then there's a chance that they develop a stronger signet or a double signet, which is not allowed. And Xaden is bonded to the dragon. I'm pretty sure it's like his father's dragon or his brother's dragon, or it was somebody's dragon. She's just wondering what his second signet is. We have Taran saying, you doubt your judgment as if I did not choose you for it. She confronts Xaden and she's demanding that he tell her what the signet is. And he just keeps going, stop, 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 even though he said that he would answer her questions and she's asking. Xaden sort of proposes this question of like, how long does it take for someone to fall out of love with you? And then Xaden sort of reveals that in order for Xaden to have survived thus far, he would have to know everything. And there's only one signet that riders are killed for having. So Xaden basically has a intrinsic or whatever it was, but he can tell what people's intentions are. And then she says Xaden is more dangerous than I ever imagined. So Xaden basically has the ability to read minds, more or less. They managed to raise the wards for a little bit using the fire from the dragons, and the wards go on, but they're not fully on. Now Xaden and Violet are having this like weird back and forth because Xaden has the ability to kind of read intuition and people's intent. So he can kind of read your mind, but not really, sort of, whatever. And then intentions. This is sort of where the narration points out that as I continue to muddle through my thoughts, intentions, what the fuck ever. Like, it's okay. Xaden can read minds. That's basically it. Xaden keeps saying that, like, oh, you could just turn me in and I'll be executed, which doesn't make any sense because, one, they're a part of a rebellion. They should already get executed. Also, I don't think that the rebellion should hold up the old archaic ways of executing anyone that has the ability to read minds. It just doesn't make sense, but I guess that's still something we're actively executing people for. And Xaden's like, you could have executed me for this. They meet with, like, the generals of the school or whatever, including her mom. And Violet asks Xaden like what their intentions are, and then he sort of does this brief little like explanation of what some of them are thinking, but most of them have their shields up, which means he can't read their minds, which is a basic ability. So really, how dangerous are mind reading abilities? Really, Xaden is both a jaw-dropping weapon and a frightening liability. Blah blah blah. And then we have another I flip my dagger, whatever. You have the heart of a writer, but the mind of a scribe, Violet. That's what her mom says. So now they're trying to they learned that the two journals they had, one of them was propaganda basically, and they're counter comparing it to another journal that's written in a different language that Violet doesn't understand in order to see what is the difference between the two, so that they can figure out how to raise the wards, because the way that they raised the wards didn't work. Xaden has this line, I might be skilled enough to land a death blow, but you alone have the power to fucking destroy me. And then they have this weird conversation about gravity. Again, this is Violet's thing. You could throw my entire world into upheaval and I would still love you. You could keep secrets, run a revolution, frustrate the shit out of me, probably ruin me, and I would still love you. I can't make it stop. I don't want to. You're my gravity. Nothing in my world works without you. Gravity, the one force we can never escape. To me, this is cringe. Cringe in a weird way, because these two people have known each other probably less than a year, and this is some love bombing, in my opinion. The war college transitions to straight up war. Brennan is sort of deciding he doesn't want to interfere and help the propaganda side of the government needs their help to defend their citizens, and Brennan is kind of refusing. But Violet's saying like, hey, we should help the civilians. We shouldn't let them all die. This doesn't make any sense. And then we have this weird, another little moment here where everybody just sort of crowds behind Violet. Violet has a look in her eye, the same one before the squad battle last year. She's onto something, and from our experience, you just roll with it, which is like, whatever, let's just go. They sort of all decide they're gonna go help the people, whatever, with the fight, and they encounter Violet's mother, who is at an outpost. They demand that Violet's mother let her go to the ward so that she can kind of try and fix it or repair it or start a new one. She's like, no, but eventually she lets them go. They go down there and they find a dragon near the ward, and not just any dragon, it's Bade. That would be Jack's dragon. And then Jack is there, And he says, "You're right on time, Sorengale." He stabs his own dragon in the neck and then basically destroys the ward with the dragon's blood somehow. And then Jack is kind of on the ground and he only has minutes to live because he just killed his own dragon. Jack is just sort of laughing maniacally, blah, blah, blah. And then Jack sort of revealed that he is actually a Venin. Jack has turned Venin. And his reason for this, by the way, is I made this choice the second I saw her bond the most powerful dragon at the threshing. So the whole reason he has turned ultimate evil is because Violet bonded the strongest dragon, and he's mad about that, which is absurd. And then Violet throws a dagger, the wrong dagger, because of course they say that Jack is the reason they developed the signet blocking serum, which again just doesn't make any sense. It also doesn't make sense that Jack's transition into a Venom doesn't make sense. When he challenged Violet, he like did something to her, and it was kind of implied to be his signet, but now we know it's not his signet, and he was like sort of using Venom power somehow. But they decided to save him for some reason. They repaired him. Who knows why? Violet's mom sort of like looks directly at her and says, "There are incredibly powerful signets among you, gifted riders." And she goes on a tangent. He gives us the highest probability of keeping our most effective weapon alive. They're referring to Xaden keeping Violet alive. They're preparing for like a big fight. Cat and Violet have mended their little feud, and now Violet says, "I might not like her, but damn do I respect her." Xaden says, "I love you. The world does not exist for me beyond you," which is there's a change in the weather, which is Violet's mother's signet, and she says, "It's my mother. It's her way of imbuing her favorite weapon, me." Because again, the narrative has to tell us how important Violet is all the time. There's a bunch of wyverns that appear. There's a big one, and it's the sage. He's come, and they're all fighting or whatever. Violet is wielding her power like no tomorrow. Blah blah blah. Everyone's dying. Violet once more flips the dagger and catches the tip because that's just the only way that she knows how to fight, I guess. Then we have another point where here she encounters a Venom who says, "Oh, you are a powerful one, aren't you? The lightning wielder." And the Venom basically says that they plan to deliver her. They plan to deliver her to the sage. And then again, we have this repetition of "you will turn for something much more dangerous," which is a reference to her dream. Adarna, her dragon, sort of comes out and attacks. She encounters her friend Jezebel or whatever, who explains to her the difference. The 7 is 7 runes, 7. There's 7 different types of dragons, which doesn't make sense because there's only 6 types of dragons. And then Violet says, "For the first time, I'm the one holding what is the ultimate secret." And then her mother finally trusts her to raise the wards. As they say, they won't attack, not yet. They're still waiting. What the fuck for? And then me. But that is Xaden saying that. Xaden goes on another rant about how Violet is his home. And then they're trying to imbue the wardstone. And previously, imbuing the wardstone with their power took them weeks. Just for the record. It took them weeks. This is where Violet sort of learns that her dragon, Adriana, is actually the 7th dragon. She's not a black dragon. She's the rarest dragon in the world. And then we have this beautiful line of dialogue that is the most... Just listen. This is the dragon talking to her. "I waited 650 years to hatch. Waited until your 18th summer, when I heard our elders talk of the weakling daughter of their general. The girl forecasted to become the head of the scribes, and I knew. You would have the mind of a scribe and the heart of a writer. You would be mine. You are as unique as I am. We want the same things." So she's the 7th breed of dragon, blah, blah, blah. They plan to imbue the Warstone with her power in order to use all the dragons to seal it and whatever. Violet's trying to use her power to force everything into the Wardstone to rapidly charge it by herself, which previously took weeks. She can do it all by herself. Violet's mother sort of decides to sacrifice herself by using Sloane's ability to energy siphon. She has her suck out all of her power and transition it into the Wardstone, both Violet's mother's power and her dragon's power, so both of them die. The Wardstone goes it's been erected. Hooray! Everything's good. Everything works out great. Violet's mother's dead. And then they have this encounter where she meets with Xaden, And she says, my mother saved us. She's dead. And he says, I'm so sorry. And she's like, why would you be sorry? And he's like, I didn't want her dead. I just, I can never want anyone you love dead, but whatever. He explains that Violet should be scared of him. And when he looks at her, he reveals that he is now a Venom. He has become a Venom in their last battle. Then on the last chapter, we sort of switch to Xaden's perspective, and this is him fighting the Sage, and he's been having the same nightmares, and the Sage basically tells Xaden he has to use the power of the Venom in order to escape what is his death, in order to save Violet, which he eventually does. And then Xaden sort of meets up with Jack, and Jack's just like, welcome to our fucked up family. Guess we're brothers now. And okay, I finally finished it. Oh my god, that took so long. Let's do the cliff notes real quick. That took way too long to get through. When I read Fourth Wing, I was convinced to take up the second book. I was convinced that I should read the second book, because at the end of Fourth Wing, I was still kind of intrigued just enough to see like what happens next. After this book, I'm going to go ahead and say I'm not going to read the next one. I will not, absolutely not, unless I'm like actually paid to read it, because this book was a complete mess from start to finish. Narrative, characters, story, plot hole. I think the biggest gripe I have with this book is probably how often every character seems to tell Violet how powerful she is, how unique she is, how her abilities are the most important. And we get kind of this like little red herring where she's having the reoccurring dreams with the Sage basically telling her like, oh, you're the most powerful, your power, we haven't seen it in centuries, it's some of the most powerful, whatever. And then later on in the narrative, it's kind of confirmed like, oh yeah, lightning signets haven't been around for like a century. It's pretty rare. And we're constantly saying like Violet is the most important, Violet is the most rare. But then at the very end of the book, literally the last chapter, it sort of implies that the nightmares that Violet has been experiencing, Xaden has been experiencing. So it might be like the connection that they have with their mental bond, like when he was giving her cunnilingus and his thoughts went into her head like explicitly without like any filter whatsoever. So maybe she's been getting his dreams and he's been getting her dreams and blah blah blah. So the Sage was actually talking to Xaden, and again, Xaden is also just ridiculously powerful, both of them at every point. If I pointed out every single time, which I tried to do, every single time the narrative points out that Violet is powerful or that Xaden is dangerous, it happens so often. And to piggyback off of that, Xaden and Violet's relationship genuinely doesn't make sense. It's like borderline a miscommunication trope, but it doesn't even it's more just like you should be able to ask the person that you love a question and have them answer it. But Xaden's saying that he's totally allowed to not answer questions and keep secrets from her because he's the leader of a revolution or whatever, and there's certain things he can't tell her. The only thing that he couldn't tell her was his second signet. That makes sense. That does make sense for him to withhold that information, even if it makes him less of a character, like, overall. But for him to imply that he can't tell her, like, everything about what they're doing because secrets are, like, important makes genuinely no sense. Xaden's priorities are also pretty cut and clear. Xaden says multiple times that he's totally fine with the whole kingdom burning down as long as Violet's safe. But Violet continually just ignores these instances and just continues on with this fantasy that Xaden's a revolutionary and that he cares about fighting for what's right, when he explicitly does not. He literally, quite literally, sold his soul in order to try and help her. So I don't know why Violet is so naive, but also just on that point, Violet's narrative makes absolutely no sense. Just, it's so, she never learns a lesson. She's always just this annoying little voice it's not even cute anymore, right? Because in the first book, her being kind of snippy and witty, it was kind of like, it was almost endearing, at least to me, like at a certain point. In this book, it's just annoying. It is terrible. There's also points in this book where it kind of seems like the author is arguing with the criticism of the first book, where she the characters are having a conversation about how the parafet, the threshing, and the gauntlet are all kind of pointless, and it is pointless. It doesn't make any sense. But Violet defends it as if it makes her a better rider, as if the fact that she's not bonded to two of the rarest and most powerful dragons on the planet and her ultra powerful signet isn't what makes her special. That is what makes her special. It's not anything else. The Varish has the ability, that he can like detect weaknesses or whatever, and Violet is so good at her shielding that he can't detect any weaknesses in her other than her love for other people, which is so generic if you think about it. Like, your ability is to know people, and you didn't think to like attack the people they love first. Like, I'm sorry, that's just nonsense. We have this whole sequence of her being told like how powerful she is and how she can block out Dane's ability and other people can't. And then when push comes to shove, she like deliberately shows Dane specific images that makes him turn coat. Why couldn't she just tell him that, or like offer that to him sooner or something? I don't understand. Violet's dragon, her second dragon, being the seventh and rarest kind of dragon, complete Mary Sue. Violet's dragons, to that extent, the dragons in this book make no sense because they're saying multiple points. The dragons are like, we chose you, I chose you, of course you're worthy, me choosing you is all you really need to know. But dragons also chose Jack Barlow. They chose Varish. They chose evil people, and dragons deliberately withhold information all the time. So why is this dragon having this like the dragons are having like this superiority moment where they're like, we dragons don't make any mistakes. They literally bonded with a Venom, and then even Zayden's dragon made the mistake of bonding with him when he fell to become a Venom. He turned to using the dark magic or whatever. So dragons, so this whole narrative is just it's complete nonsense. It bothers me so much. The whole plot of enemies to lovers, I mean, there's some contention over this where people say like, they don't actually have to be enemies. It's more just about the tension between the two characters. But Violet almost explicitly says that like Xaden wanted to kill her. And even when she learns that Xaden didn't want to kill her, she still repeats this idea. And then Xaden even says like, oh, I didn't want to kill you then, or like, I could have killed you at any point. And it's like, why are we saying this unless this is just the author trying to insert this? Because it doesn't make any sense, right? If Xaden didn't want to kill her from the very beginning, we established that at the end of the first book. Xaden was smitten for her, and then Xaden is attracted to her, and that's it. That's all we need. You don't have to like shovel it on like, oh, I was fighting the impulse to kill it. No, you weren't. You were never. And then Xaden even felt bad when Violet's mother died. Violet's mother is like basically she's like Hitler. Why are we like suddenly feeling sympathy for this character? It doesn't make any sense. And it just goes on and on. The sex scenes are kind of boring, but really what just bothers the hell out of me is the dialogue between Xaden and Violet. It's too cringy. It is completely absurd. Like if you told me these people were like they've been dating for like 5 years or they've been together for a while, these sort of feelings are kind of valid, right? But the way that it's described in this book with how their relationship has been, this is pure just like love bombing. They're both just like, oh my god, you're everything to me. You're my gravity. You're my whole world. I want the world to burn down around you, which I guess is something that in romance and romance fantasy is kind of like, it's a theme that is like, yeah, you want a main character, like the male main character, to basically want to like destroy the world for the female character. Okay, I totally get that. That's fine. But you can't have that character be positioned as morally superior and like always correct and right and powerful and whatever, and then have him sort of throw all of his morals out the window specifically for one person. Because Xaden's character is a revolutionary. He is the leader of the rebellion. He is like that is his responsibility and his duty. And for him to even suggest ever that he would throw all of that away specifically for Violet is nonsense. It's not romantic, it's delusion. It is like absurd, like borderline obsessionary concerning behavior. I feel like there were so many things in this book that I just like, I hope I pointed it out when I went through all of it. Like there's conversations that the characters have where they repeat the same thing, right? Another thing that bothers me is the constant use of gods. There's like god characters inside the book, like Dune and like Malik or whatever, and even oh gods, like they randomly throw it out there, And none of these, for one, Violet doesn't really seem spiritual or religious or whatever, but everybody references these gods in the exact same way. There's no variance to it. Violet just throws them out like, look, Wrath of Dune, oh gods, 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 just constantly. It's almost out of character the way that the characters talk. And I'm sure you could just easily just say shit or throw in a curse word and it would make sense. Or like, uh, but the problem with establishing like a lore with like gods and like a background is you have to kind of give it a little bit of depth, but we don't really have a whole lot of depth on these things. So Violet's just throwing out these names left and right, and I don't know what they mean. I don't know their significance. They're just like, oh, by Dune, oh, by Malik's beard. Like, it just means nothing to me, and it's just like a weird placeholder. I think that this book wasn't edited very well. I'm going to say that. It is very repetitive at certain points. The amount of times that Violet says her stomach does something or her heart does something, it is constant. It is absurd. Every single time Violet is nervous or afraid, her heart or stomach will do something. And it's, I swear, if I control F'd the word heart, it might appear in this book maybe like 500 times, which is nonsense. It's just so much. So by the end of the book, we kind of get the idea that Xaden is actually the one that was supposed to be the most powerful. He's the one that the Venom want, and they were trying to use Violet to turn him against her. Another thing that bothers me is the way that Violet's fighting is described, and I pointed this out a few times, but anytime Violet is engaged in combat, she has one move explicitly. It is flipping her dagger, catching the tip, and throwing it. And it's constant. It's nonstop with this. It's to the point where I genuinely... fight scenes with Violet are so boring because it's all she has. It's all that Rebecca knows how to describe is Violet flipping a dagger, catching it, and throwing it. That's it. I really tried my best to like this book. It was a trudge to get through. It took me so long to read it. It took me even longer just to film talking about it. It's so, there's so much wrong with it. I think this is almost everything I would say that I think is wrong with modern publishing. It is just, it's almost written kind of like fan fiction in like a really bad way. I don't think the prose is terrible. It just needed to be edited just a little bit more. We have so many hearts. My heart drops. My stomach lurches. I swallow back bile constantly all throughout. There's no variance to it whatsoever. The plot itself is kind of, it's nonsense. Violet is this reader. She cares a lot about books, but then she has like her friends help her read the books, and then, oh my god, the major plot holes that she didn't read the book all the way through. Like, what are we talking about? It doesn't make any sense. And the fact that it's like, oh, you have the mind of a scribe and the heart of a writer. I don't even know what that means. That is pure nonsense. But the fact that the dragon waited 600 years specifically for Violet when they found the other dragons talking about Violet being welcomed into the Riders Quadrant. It's Violet's a Mary Sue. Xaden and Violet's relationship makes no sense. Violet's nickname is Violence. That's stupid. Violet is overpowered constantly, and the narrative just, it just loves her so much. It is working hands and knees, both hands, just throwing neck all over Violet all the time, because I have never read an author that loved their main character more than Rebecca Yarros loves Violet, because Violet is just constantly told how amazing she is. Yeah, I'm not reading the second book, or I'm not reading the third book. This book was very, very bad, and generally just awful. It's just awful.